Hope everybody is doing well on this particular day. Yes, it is a day not that long away from Christmas. As a matter of fact, I'm over here at the Hayti Heritage Center, the Cultural Arts Center that I work at sometimes, and all along those lines. And they're actually preparing for Black Santa. And I probably could play the role with the beard and the mustache and all in that space, but I'm actually going to pass from that particular role. They've got Santa Warren and other people that'll be doing that role, but they are getting set up. There was actually a co-drive earlier, and there was a folks that were coming to pick up some of the coats that were not picked up. I actually got, I think, a couple of items from that coat drive and all along those lines. So that is always good to have happen during the winter seasons and all along those lines. So, like I said, they're getting prepared, and then literally the day after Christmas, right here in this same location, will be our annual Kwanzaa celebration. So there is the 7 days of Kwanzaa, and day one, literally the day after Christmas, will be here at the Hayti Heritage Center. Yours truly will be doing a panel around community safety and around a number of other things as well, trying to get in touch with some folks that might have some thoughts about how to be safe in these difficult times that we live in and all along those lines. And of course, they'll have some group called Africa Unplugged, as well as a dance group, I believe, from Virginia, as well as some other performers, and all in that space. And I've got a tremendous guest. I don't know how it is where they are and everything, but right here in Durham, North Carolina, it's starting to get a little bit on the chilly side. I know last night we were in those under 30 kind of temperatures and all in that space. So definitely in the nighttime, it's been very chilly. And even in the midday, it's been like around the 40s, which can be a little bit nippy for around here in North Carolina, even though you expect that in the winter month and all along those lines. But I know one of the events that we had recently was actually a whole notion of a very popular mini series. First, it was a movie that I was aware of in 2010. Then it was a mini series, and that was about Bass Reeves. So we've actually had a mini series that just concluded with Paramount Plus, and the woman that played Bass Reeves' wife is actually from this area and is actually an alumni of one of our prominent high schools, that being Hillside High, which has a very great drama department. So Lauren Banks was part of that, and they did a whole red carpet treatment. As a matter of fact, I think we still have some of the red carpet laying around here, as they had some food. The folks watching that last episode, and a lot of folks hoping that there will be a season two, but only time will tell that, and all along those lines. But even though she wasn't involved with that project, I've got my first guest that has definitely been involved in the space of acting, in the space of being a writer themselves, and doing a lot of other great and amazing things. And I've been hoping to get them on for a while. I finally managed to have that happen, and all in that way. So they are a published author, a poet, a playwright, as well as a dancer. And I'm definitely a fan of the dance community, as we have a very popular dance activity that takes place right here in Durham, North Carolina, every summer by the name of the American Dance Festival. I'm gonna find out if Shadaya, and I hope that I'm pronouncing the name correct, but if not, I'm sure she'll correct me as well. But if Miss Nelson has ever come to this whole performance, or if she's even thought about it, because I do know that it is a major dance activity that is here on a regular basis and all along those lines. As a matter of fact, my dad's other half, his significant other of almost 20 years, was a dance critic, Linda Bellins, and all in that space. And she is still dancing, even in her, I want to say, dad in his early 80s. So Linda may be in her late 70s, but she is still dancing and showing that you can still get those moves on no matter what your age is, and all in that space. So she's had a couple of performances that have shown that you can dance no matter what the age is, and that you need to have that sense of energy and exercise and all along those lines. So I'm gonna bring Miss Nelson on and see what her thoughts about this whole notion of dancing well into your later years and everything. Because I'm thinking that definitely, I think that she just had her first child, if I'm remembering correctly, but Misty Copeland is not showing any signs of slowing down and all along those lines. And I'm thinking you probably aren't slowing down either, even though that age thing does get in the way, and we all manage to do that. I know that I've hit the 60s and all in that space. I used to tease Baba Chuck because, a lot of times there is this notion of the common grounds, or I forgot what they are called in African dance culture, but he would try to get me when he was living to dance in the middle of those dance celebrations, and I would usually be trying to hide because I think of myself as having two left feet and all in that space. So Papa Chuck might be trying to get me, and I might be going the opposite direction, trying to figure out what other things I could do other than getting in those common grounds and getting those dance moves on. And maybe I should have done a better job when Baba Chuck was living and all in that space. So I guess the first question I got to ask you is, when did you first know that you were a creative? Because I've known you through LinkedIn and some other sources as well. So when did you first realize that you were a creative, and what got you into the creative world? Because you do a lot in the creative world. You're a poet, you're a dancer, you're a playwright. You might even be writing movies and other things. So what got you into the creative world?
Well, thank you, Mark, so much for having me and that wonderful introduction. So I am Shadia Asia Nelson, and I started the dancing with my mom back in the day. She introduced me back when I was about 13 years old, and we were both on the dance floor. She had told me one night, "Come on, just throw on something you can move in, and let's go." I had no idea what my mom signed me up for. Once the African drum started going, and then I jumped in into the line with the warm up, and I was able to keep going after the warm up is pretty intense. And then I continued, the love of dance ever since. So I've had the fortunate opportunity to dance with a number of different African dance groups. My first group was First Circle um, First Circle in Hawaii when I went out to school at Hawaii Pacific University. I joined that group in Samba Ashe, so it's Brazilian Samba and African dance. I now live in Miami, Florida, and I've been here for about 19 years. And so I've been having the opportunity to perform with Delu Drum and Dance Ensemble. I've performed with Venus Rising. It's an all women drum and dance ensemble until it sunset a few years ago. And Afrique Abade, it was all an Ivory Coast group. I auditioned, and then I've had the opportunity to also perform in Waking Kaya that featured African dance as well. And I danced throughout my time at Hawaii Pacific University for the TEM industry performance where they needed African dance. And I had a South African uh, instructor for the choreography. So that was really awesome. So I continue that love. And I don't think there's really an age as long as your body says you're good and those knees can continue to carry you through. I don't think there's an age. There's definitely a lot of master teachers that I've been learning from over the years, and they continue to excel as long as the body keeps moving. And I think as long as you can continue to condition it and take care of it, keep on dancing. So maybe you can, move from those two left feet.
Give back those two left feet and get into some dancing moves. Actually, one of the things that I have teasingly said is one of the greatest inventions, and definitely I know that it is part of the Miami culture. And all along those lines is whoever came up with the notion of strobe lights. I am a big fan because strobe lights, you can be the worst dancer in the world and nobody will notice because strobe lights help you look like a great dancer when the strobe lights are working the way that they should and everything. So I've actually thought that the strobe lights, whoever invented it, I thank you because definitely it helps the poorest of us dancers maybe think that we can do better than we are actually doing and everything. And I was looking at some of your bio stuff and even some of the stuff around Miami. I know that you said that you knew that you were going to make a career of this, you were going to make a life of this, and all along those lines. So I was just wondering, what about dance and what about the arts it let you know that this was a career for you? Because I know that even here on this network, we've got some people that will make the argument that the creative arts is not a thing that you can make a living off of. And we do know the whole story of the actors in LA that have to work at bars, or even I've got a funk musician friend that literally has to drive Uber, and I've got other friends that have had to drive Lyft or DoorDash that are in the creative space. So I was just wondering, at what point did you know that this was going to be your career, your life, and what do you say to those naysayers that are like basically like, hey, there's no way that you can make a living in the arts, and you don't need to be trying to make a living in the arts.
Well, I think it all depends on your creativity, your drive, and having a real focus and passion. any true artist, there has to be a real passion in order to fulfill that part of yourself, in any means, in any discipline. If you speak to a lot of artists, I find personally when you take the time to learn multiple arts, so to be more than a dancer, to be a director, to be an actress. I don't sing though, I don't have that triple threat going, but I do write. And writing is also at the forefront. So if you learn additional tools, I've learned lighting, I've learned engineering, to do the theater lighting and sound. What are different assets you want to add into your toolkit? In addition to that, as a writer, I started writing as early as third grade with poetry. I was introduced, it was an elective class in elementary school, and I fell in love with it. And I found the introduction through Eloise Greenfield and Nikki Giovanni and Shel Silverstein, and later learned about Langston Hughes, who was a playwright and a poet. Wow, see, it does exist. You can do multiple things. And no coincidence of his involvement with Zora Neale Hurston with her amazing play called A Raisin in the Sun. One of the lines from Langston Hughes, Harlem, for a dream deferred, what happens to a dream deferred?
Mhm.
And, this year I decided to really put more energy into my goals as being an accomplished writer. I decided to go ahead and publish all 6 books at the same time in October. So they've been on the shelves technically for late October, so about 2-3 months. It's been on the shelf, so I'm really excited to share my work with everyone. I have 5 collections of poetry. 2 of them are more about love stories. The other 2 are more about healing moments in my life, middle, high school, college years, and post, pre and post motherhood, and that rite of passage, and what it means to become a mom, and what does it mean to be a passionate artist. I see myself as a healing artist as one of my healing purposes of being here, and how I can continue to share these stories and narratives and honoring our history. I think it's important to document and share our stories and take control of the narrative and put it in context from to where we are right now. I have several pieces that I felt really inspired during the pandemic when I had additional time to really delve in and be more creative
Yeah,
and write
yeah.
these narratives. So now I can leave this legacy of storytelling and our history in printed form for my daughter, who is a teenager, and for the world, to
Mhm.
make sure that our stories are shared. So I definitely believe it's possible. I do work with a community-based organization and who saw my talent as a writer, as a dancer, as a director, and said, I would love for you to share your talents with my young people. So that's what I've been doing for the past 19 years, is sharing my talent with the young people and being involved in the creative arts and different dance ensembles here in Florida.
No, before I get to the other guests, and by the way, one of our founders is actually from Florida as well. So I know Nick Palveda oftentimes talks about the U because I think he went to the University of Miami as part of his college education, and then part of the things that he's done both in law school and other things as well. But I was just curious, and before I bring on the other 2 guests that I've got, and there might be others that join us as well, how do you do? Because it's something that I talk about a lot on this show and just in general. You mentioned being a uh, mother of a teenager. I think a teenage daughter is what you said, and all along those lines. And while I have no kids of my own, I do have my 2 nephews that are part of my family circle and all along those lines. So I was just wondering, how do you manage to balance life and work? I don't know if there are relationships going on at the moment, but how do you manage that? Because I know that that is something that a lot of people try to deal with, and as creatives, it can sometimes be a challenge. So I was just wondering, how do you manage that life work balance, and even trying to raise the kids, and if there is a other half dealing with them as well. But I just wonder, how do you do that work life balance?
It's interesting. My daughter, she's my teacher. She's my heart. I learned so much from her, patience and compassion. I fell in love with my daughter the moment I was pregnant, and we've had a strong connection ever since. And I like to share my ideas with them and get their thoughts and ideas. Even coming up with the graphic design for all of the book covers, I was like, "Well, what do you think about this one? Oh, I love that, Mom. I like you do that. All right, what do you? I'm thinking about doing this as a marketing strategy. What do you think about that? Yeah, that's good, Mom. Well, maybe change that. Maybe that ring, maybe that soundtrack that you have for that graphic, maybe not." And I was like, well, so then, what's cool? What is something that young people would be open to? So they become my consultant um, for a lot of the work that I do, and they've been so supportive. I take them to my dance class, dance rehearsals and classes and drumming. So they're all embedded into the culture as well. So it's just all integrated, and they've been so supportive. And one of the works that I have published is a three-part play series, She Kept Her Bra On, The Chronicles of a Teenage Love Affair. It's a funny look at how you can see teen dating from an educational and informative stance on healthy relationships and setting the warning signs of abuse as well. So I think this is a great tool to use with young people, not only young people, but for adults as well, looking back at their lives. And dating is not so much different depending on certain circumstances from a young person and an adult. Some things are the same, and the warning signs of unhealthy relationships look the same as an adult.
It's interesting you say that because one of the things that I feel that we don't do is pay enough attention to the warning signs. Because I know that even in my early 60s, there have been times that I'm going like, that I wish friends would have warned me about what was going on. But the old saying is that your friends will tell you that they didn't tell you about what was going on because they're afraid that you wouldn't have listened. And a lot of times that is a very true statement and everything because sometimes those warning signs can be there and they will claim that they don't want to tell you one because they don't want to hurt your feelings, and two because they figure that you're so enraptured or enamored that you're not going to pay attention to the fact that the warning signs can be very much there for the taking and all along those lines. But that's just something that I feel that we don't do enough of is trying to understand the interpersonal relationships and everything. But I'd love to know your thoughts around that. Is that something we should do more of?
Most definitely. With the play, it provides the audience tools on how to navigate these conversations and why it's important to have these real conversations and put everything on the table of what you want in a relationship. So if someone makes unwanted advances, how do you respond to that? Do you just laugh it off and giggle and give the mixed messaging or make it confusing? Well, then how do I know if that's okay or not okay? Well, you can always ask. It's actually rather endearing. Can I kiss you? Is that okay? Is it okay if I get a hug? That's endearing. That's really sweet. That's showing that you're respecting that person's boundaries. You see these conversations and choices that the behaviors that are made by the characters in all three-part of the play series, and you get to see how some people use manipulation to their advantage of why they're asking certain questions to their advantage to act like they're your friend, but they're really not. Not very different than adult relationships. I spoke to adult. She's like, I think I need to read this book and share it with all my friends. As an adult. So it definitely, and then also to inform both gender sides of the relationship, right? So what does that look like? Removing the stigma and stereotypes and expectations of what it means to play a role in a relationship when you don't have a loving relationship for yourself first.
That's
So
interesting
that's
you
one of the
say.
important themes.
It's interesting you say that, Shadia, and everything, because one of the things that I'm thinking about is that sometimes the cultural institutions can also play a part in this as well, because I know that I've had the pleasure or displeasure, depending on the circumstances, of dating folks that are very much in the religious space and all along those lines. And sometimes they are a little bit conflicted, for lack of a better term, because I know that there have even been cases in my own life where there have been moments of intimacy, and it might even just be simple intimacy like a kiss and everything, and then or a hug, and then folks are feeling that it went a little bit too far and all in that space because they have conflicted emotions based on their religious upbringings and all in that space. So I was wondering if the play touches on that as well, because I do know that there are sometimes those institutions that can play a role in what is going on, whether it is school, whether it's church, or a number of other things. So I was wondering if the play and the works that you are doing touch on that as well? Because I know there have been a few times that I've been in those situations, and then the folks are conflicted after having a moment of intimacy, whatever that moment is.
Interesting. I don't bring an institutional lens. It's more a youth lens.
Right.
I wouldn't have been able to write the plays without the young people involved in the organization I work with Urgent Inc. to add their voice and their lens into their experiences. And one of the common things is not having a person to talk to.
Right.
A lot of young people feel that they're being lectured or feel that they're being judged by an adult figure in their life, whatever the non-traditional household looks like, whether it's auntie, it's cousin, whoever that go-to person is. Many young people don't have a person to go to when they have questions. I said, well, this is very important for young people to have these conversations, and so the plays are set within an after school program where you have that safe, supportive space to have these dialogue to provide that guidance and support, like a good bra. So that's where the title came from. A good bra is hard to find. So when you find one like a good friend, you got to hold on to them. A good friend provides guidance, direction, and support, and some lift. So, like a good friend, you got to hold on to that good bra.
Speaking of which, I'm going to bring in another good person. That is Bola, who is actually coming to us all the way from UK, and they are actually involved in some of these conversations as well. Because I know part of what they deal with is being a self-awareness Doan, and I've got to find out exactly what a Doan is, as well as a author, coach, and energy practitioner. So some of these conversations that we've even been having now are very much what they are involved in, even with some of their own work and all along those lines. So I'm gonna bring in Bola, and I've got another guest as well. But I'm curious to see what the book is all about because they've got a book out as well, a book that is called Soul Bites or Daily Soul Bites. So definitely love to know what the Daily Soul Bites are all about, and also exactly what a doyen is. I do know some terms like a doula, but I'm not sure what a doyen is. So I guess that's the first question, Bola, is what is a doyen? And if you can tell us a little bit about the Daily Soul Bites as well.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Mark. Thanks for inviting me. Really nice to be here. It is very cold as well here in London. So, yes, I do sympathize with you. Yes, so my book, the Daily Soul Bites book, this is the new book that's just been released. It's just been released by Balboa Press, a division of Hay House, about 2 weeks ago. And it really just shares insights. It shares insights and encouragement around a number of different topics, including compassion, heartbreak, self-awareness, which I'm a doyen of. And a doyen really is, someone who has an emphasis. I place an emphasis and I have a lot of training around self-awareness, an understanding of the thoughts and the emotions and the feelings that we have around us. And I think this is the first place that emotional mastery comes from. And that's what I do. I help others master their emotions because I've spent my lifetime doing that. So yes, that's what a doyen is, and it's really about self-awareness. My work is about self-awareness to master our emotions.
And along those same lines, I know that there's an entire system that you're a part of as well. So if you could talk a little bit about the spit emotional mastery and how that can help people cultivate their abundance. Because I know a lot of folks, I'm imagining that even Shadaya is trying to figure out how to have the most abundant life that she can have and all along those lines. So just tell us a little bit about the Smith emotional technique and or the Smith emotional mastery and what that's all about.
Well, really, when we talk about what do we want from life, a lot of the times it's really about abundance. There is a need for us to understand that frequency of abundance because abundance is our true nature. And for me, the Smith Emotional Mastery System, which I created, is about how do we really align ourselves to that frequency of abundance. And the SMIT stands for SMITT. And S is the self awareness, an understanding of the thoughts and the emotions and the sensations that we have. And then there's the mindfulness, the M, which is looking at how do we become more aware those particular thoughts that are positive and those that are negative. And really, we have about 90,000 thoughts going through our heads every day. How do we become more aware of this? And this is what I teach in my programs, how we become more aware using different templates and techniques and strategies. Then there's the integration, the I, which is about beginning to really get more comfortable and enjoy the polarity of these sensations and thoughts within us. So we have the negative, we can feel fear one moment and we can feel love in another moment. And it's not about eradicating fear or eradicating anxiety, it's about becoming more comfortable with the existence of all the different diversity of emotions within us. And then there is the T, this the first T, which is about trauma care. Because a lot of us have been through trauma, whether in childhood or as adults. And it's about how we become parents to our own selves as adults. We may have been through certain relationships that did not particularly serve us. And trauma care is about becoming much more aware of these particular trauma imprints and then beginning to reparent ourselves differently with self care, doing very simple things on a daily basis, whatever our permission slips are. And the last T is about transmutation. And this is about aligning to that infinite intelligence within all of us and knowing that whatever we want to see changing in our lives, it starts from us. And that us, it's that infinite intelligence, that higher self within us. So a lot of my work is really about helping my clients to align to that infinite intelligence that is within us. And that's what the Smith Emotional Mastery does.
Along those same lines, and this is actually for both of you, but I'll start with you, Shadaya, and then definitely hear from you as well, Bola, and everything. One of the things that I've been fascinated by, and I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts about this, is through Clubhouse, I became involved with a group called Funky Eye Puppets. Haven't been involved as much lately, but IPC, who is definitely a well-known haiku poet as well as a well-known individual. I think he even worked with George Lucas at one time and everything. He got a number of us during the pandemic to be part of this voice acting troupe that was definitely geared toward children's stories and all along those lines. And one of the things that he oftentimes talked about is how we oftentimes lost that kid-like wonderment. So sometimes we would have to get out of that whole adult mindset, which we know we as adults love to be in, and to be able to identify as a kid and to have some of that childlike wonderment and all in that space. So I was just wondering, one, your thoughts around, are we doing enough to encourage our adult population to stay in that kid-like wonderment? And also, are we doing enough to encourage creativity? Because even you, Shadaya, mentioned the fact that you were introduced to dance. And I know even here at the Hayti Center, there are a number of folks that are learning various styles of dance, including African dance at a young age. And I think there was some even people taking ballet, but sometimes I don't know that we encourage our creative bones as much as we should and everything. But I wanted to love your thoughts and then also Bola's thoughts about that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I miss being over at the Hayti. So I wanted to say also thank you for the opportunity having my film back in the day debut at the Black Diaspora Film Festival. So appreciate that. And American Dance Ensemble with Babachak Davis, he was absolutely a phenomenal being. And it's so sad that we don't have him here. And so anytime I got a chance to see them perform at the Hayti was absolutely amazing for Kwanzaa. So sadly, I'm going to miss it this year. I think there's definitely an opportunity in a great way to include adults into the creativity in the creative space. I think there's definitely spaces where there's community classes for African dance. I know here in Florida there definitely are some. I know there were some African dance community classes over in Durham as well, that I think I took while I was there for a stint. And I think there's more opportunity even online. There's a lot of online creative classes, whether it be writing, poetry, writers groups, and even coloring. Even just sitting and coloring is so therapeutic. So I think there's definitely an opportunity to lend to adults at any age and any stage to delve into the creativity.
Yeah. What's your take on that, Bola? You're definitely involved in that notion there in the UK, and sometimes the cultures are different as well. But do you think that there is a enough encouragement of that childlike wonderment or just creativity in general?
I would not be as positive as Shadia in that way. I think we still have a long way to go when it comes to that. There is certainly a need for us to um, encourage more reading of books. Because I think reading for me was where it all started. Being able to, I looked on the shelf. My mother was a librarian. I looked on the shelf at home, and there was a book by Ramana Maharishi titled "Who Am I?" And that book was what sowed a seed to encourage me to begin to look for that higher self within me, because that's really where creativity starts from. Our true nature is creativity, our true source, and we can create shadow, or we can create light. And I think when we really want to look at what is, where is that true meaningful passion, where does it lie? It's very individual. And I think the more we can encourage kids to begin to look at what they really feel passionate about, and give them the courage and the support to actually pursue those things. And those passions change over the years. What you're passionate about when you're 5 is not what you're passionate about when you're 10 or
Mhm.
20 or 30. So really it's that journey, that individual journey has to be led from within. And this is why I think, certain books are really very important to have in schools, to have in the libraries, books that help our children to go within. This is where true creativity lies. And then they can soar their individual passions as unique pieces of infinite intelligence can actually be seen.
Yeah. Along those same lines, Shadia, and everything, I was just wondering, we hear a lot of times where the arts are not being supported, and definitely here in the United States, but even around other Western nations as well. So I was just wondering, do you feel that we are doing enough to support the arts? Like I said, you're very involved in the creative community there in Miami and everything, and I'm imagining that y'all are running into even some of the problems that we are running into here, because a lot of times it's maybe easy to get funding for programming, but or certain types of programming, but definitely the operational costs, which is a very important part of any arts organization, are oftentimes hard to find the money to keep the lights on and to keep the staff paid and all along those lines. But I'm just wondering your thoughts as to whether we are doing enough to support the arts in general here in the United States and even globally.
There's always room for growth. And unfortunately, usually when there's budget cuts, arts is always first to go. I'm even looking like going back to visit California for my schools. All of the arts and fun electives, the reason why you want to go to school has been taken away. So where is the motivation to even want to go to school? Unfortunately, um, I would say here in Miami, Florida, there's always room for more growth and opportunities for more funding and support, and people showing up to support more of the arts. So it's both sides. So you need people to support the arts, and then there's also the funding support that also needs to be in place as well. Fortunately, I work with a community-based organization, Urgent Inc., where that's what we do. That's our focus in providing arts enrichment with a personal growth development aspect with project-based learning. It's important for young people to feel validated in what they have to say and what they want to share with the world, and exposing them to different opportunities to explore who they are, their cultural identity, and how they see themselves in their own community and how they want to see change. And through that, you use that as an avenue to invite the arts from all different types of expression, where drawing doesn't have to be an intimidating factor. It could be any element of the art. So that's where I get so excited. I get to share poetry, and okay, so let's explore this way. So let's think about free verse. And one of my favorite templates using young people is an I am poem template, and it breaks it down. So when you provide a template, so as a guide, okay, so then how do I write this poem? Well, here you go. So here's all the prompts as you go through the process, and how do you celebrate and acknowledge who you are, and how you want to share that with the world. I think that's so powerful. Even doing this with adults is definitely powerful. We've done workshops, and so definitely creativity and sharing and recognizing is so important. So there's always room. So the NEA grants, which are a little harder to get, is all needed, definitely.
Well, when doing research on you, Shaddai, and everything, you actually had the pleasure of dealing with a group that I actually became familiar with way back in the ice ages of the 80s and all along those lines, because I actually saw them in performance when I was in school in Marquette and all along those lines. And they definitely are kind of like the Disney folks in the sense that they do allow you to travel with folks. And I did not even realize that they were still in business and everything. But when I was looking in there, and I was like, wait a minute, she performed with Up with People. And I remember that in 1982 or 1983, when I was in college, literally going to what was then the Brewers Stadium and watching a performance with that group. And it carried you to like 73 cities and 8 countries and 99 shows. So is Up with People still around? And also, what was that experience like? Because, like I said, I knew that they were around in the 80s and we're now in 2023. So they're around. It would be almost like the Disney kids, which has had some tremendous success, like Britney Spears and Christian Aguilera and others. But I was just wondering, when I saw that, I was going like, "Oh, was people, are they still here?" I've got to ask you that.
Yes, they are definitely still around. I had the pleasure and the opportunity to perform with that with people year round, to travel to 9 countries and 99 shows with a cast of 135, with a cast from about at least 30 different countries. The best experience of my life, definitely. I learned more that year about myself, about my cultural identity, and performing. Our show was definitely international, about promoting world peace, with a cast from all around the world sharing that passion. And then of course they had African dance. I worked so hard to make sure. I said, okay, I got to be the dance lead. I got to represent, and do all of the dances. So I got to do the blend of the theater aspect, doing a monologue, and dedicated all the African dances and the dances generally through the whole show. Was definitely the best experience. I learned about lighting and sound, and being a seamstress for managing all the costumes backstage. So they create opportunities where you get to learn behind the scenes of what it takes to put the whole production and take it on tour, as we traveled within the states, and then when we traveled internationally, was absolutely phenomenal. And then there was opportunities we did like these special event shows. Since we had our 35th anniversary while we were on tour, so we were celebrating being a part of this bigger picture. And so they would select certain cast members to be a part of these smaller shows. And even there was a time we did a special event called for an organization called SAVE. It's like Stop All Violence Everywhere. And we were able to do a hip hop show. So very, very different than our show on international dances. This is all about hip hop. And they had a group that was an alumni of Up with People, and got to meet with the young people. This is a youth serving organization promoting awareness on the importance to stop violence. So that experience in itself was better than even going to college, even though I took my senior year to go abroad for a year. And is it still around? That year, that's when it was the last tour in 2000. We were castee to tour. And then, unfortunately, other people had closed their doors. We had learned this in the last city when we were in France, that other people was going to close their doors, due to bankruptcy. And they must have spent all their money like, well, we're closing up the doors. They didn't tell us, but we went out with a bang. It was the best experience, and I still have the best relationships. We had an amazing director, Mark Anthony. Um, he was absolutely phenomenal. Uh, he was a Broadway style director, and we had him. Unfortunately, he has passed over the years, but definitely made an impression. And but so they closed the doors for about 3-4 years, and then they open the doors back up, and then they don't have the tour as a whole year. They have it as 6 months, and then they have summer camps. If you wanted to involve with another next generation with your kids, so definitely they have opportunities to continue sharing the love of talent and community service.
And it sounds like it's something that could be used in this day and time, even with all that's going on in the world. Because it seems like that message, and it's a message that was also part of "We Are the World," which Michael Jackson and other musicians were part of as well. That could definitely be used in this era and this time. So, for both you as well as Bola, do you think that the arts are being used enough as a tool of activism? Because I actually think that the arts and activism are a natural match, but not everybody feels that way because some people get upset when art decides to be activist and to put out a message and all along those lines. But I was just wondering, you two ladies' thoughts on that and whether art should be used as a tool within the activism tool belt.
I definitely say it needs to be. It's a great opportunity to uh, make sure and express what that looks like. And it can look like what it looks for film, and look what it looks like in the visual art space. What does it look like as a performer? What does that look like in different cultural communities? I think it's important to continue pushing the narrative and why it's important for us to control the narrative in all different arts. Even hip hop, celebrating 50 years. I mean, that art form in itself was always about pushing back on the narrative and making sure that we're controlling the narrative and telling our stories, the original hip hop, and continuing to share those narratives. I think is important.
Yeah, just along those same lines and everything, where do you think, because this is a question that we mentioned earlier, we had the hip hop exhibit up and definitely some of your dances have been in the hip hop lane. So where do you think hip hop is now and where do you see hip hop 50 years from now? Because like you said, hip hop is 50 years old. So it's hard to believe that because it's a little bit younger than myself and it's actually closer to my brother's age since he is going to be 55 at the next birthday in October and everything. So it's about 4.5 years older than him, and or younger than him, I should say. But I just wonder your feeling as to where the future of hip hop is.
Yeah. Well, definitely, I'm glad you think there is going to be a future of hip hop. Because definitely, because when it first dropped, people were like, "Oh, it's just something temporary. It's not going to stick around." 50 years later, here we are. We're still talking about hip hop and where it's going to go. I think it can only go up when this next generation continues pushing back the narrative and making sure that we're claiming our stories and making sure more intentional stories are being shared through hip hop and through the culture and how we're representing the young people. I think it's so important. So I think it's just going to continue to blow up. I'm excited to see where it's going to continue to go.
How is the hip hop community going there in the UK, Bola? And do you see it having a future there as well? But are the young people as excited about it in the UK, or are they less excited there in its 50th anniversary?
Thank you, Mark. I think music is really powerful. You know, there is a lot of use that it can come into for emotional regulation, especially because gone are the days when we just talk about, success and becoming famous without looking at the emotional regulation of our youths. Because this is key. And this is what my passion is about. It's about using the art to create a foundation for our youths, whether it's by drawing or whether it's music or whether it's painting or journaling or writing, because it's not just about being famous and enjoying, some kind of peer situation or social engagements. We really want to start to look at the foundations, the emotional foundations of our children and our youths and our adults. And art can come very strongly into that. And it's very popular here. Children going into museums, going into using music to regulate how they feel, how they develop confidence, how they develop less overwhelm. It's very powerful.
I'm
So
glad you.
yes, that is something I really support.
I'm glad you mentioned that because one of the things that we talked about on this network and just in general is the notion, and I don't know whether you have, but I imagine you do, kids. I know Shadiah does because she just mentioned that earlier and everything. But a lot of people are concerned about the social media and how social media is impacting our youth. I know that there have been a lot of rises in terms of our kids hurting and harming themselves, in some cases even taking their own lives and all along those lines. So I was just wondering for both of you, how concerned are you about the impact of social media on our youth? Because I do know that that is a concern that a lot of people have had. I mean, I even think about, and I hate to say this, Shadiah, but we all know of that infamous incident that took place in Pulse there in Miami and all along those lines. But I just wonder your concerns about the notion of social media and its impact on our kids. And this is for both of you.
Since I work with young people from K to 12, and I think many of the students use social media as a means to learn something. And especially when I have a conversation with them about, well, what is it you're learning? What are you looking for? Like, who are you following? And some of it's fashion, some of it's food. For those who are into the food, those who are learning about cooking, they're like, okay, well, I need to try this different recipe. And maybe this could be something I could look into as a potential entrepreneurial opportunity. So I think there's different purposes that I think it meets those needs. And the other part I find on the sadder end is the body image, the shaming, and the profile and perpetrating a certain image. That's not always true. You never really know what's behind the veneer. You don't know how many filters are used in creating all these videos. What I do find what's really powerful with the kind of content that's streamlined, particularly say on TikTok, where a lot of young people are getting their information on what's happening in the news and the headlines. Since they're not reading newspapers, that's not really a thing that I see young people do, or I don't see very many people in general. So instead of reading newspapers, they're getting their information about the news, what's happening in TikTok. So they're very aware, not only what's happening and how they can activate action behind what they want to see changed. Been a lot of movements that the generation with my daughter has been a part, and saying, yes, I'm so happy about my generation. They're standing up, they're speaking out on things that adversely impact them, and using social media as a movement to have their voice heard. I think that is definitely powerful. So it has different purposes, and depending on how you utilize the social media content, and then how to use it as a teaching tool. Okay, so if people are presenting themselves a certain way, how do you see yourself? How do you present yourself? And how do you work on that self-love and start working on that body image and self-acceptance, and not having to constantly feel that you need to compare yourself to other people when you start looking in the mirror and loving what you see back at you. It's a process.
It sounds like it. Bola, what's your take on that? Because I know that it's not just a United States issue; it's also an issue in both Europe as well as some of the African nations and even some of just the nations around the world and everything. But what is your take on the way that our kids are using social media and maybe some of the threats that that is having as well?
I would agree with Shadia that there is definitely pockets. There are pockets of good use of media, but it's not mainstream enough. The conditioning really is about competition, is about the need to um, really look at how others are doing with their lives as opposed to how you are doing with your life. There is a need for us to increase their significant um, the availability of resources for our youths to begin to develop their own sense of authenticity, because this is key. The conditioning is more around shaming and looking at how they can be like particular groups of people. And we are all individuals all over the world. There needs to be more understanding of different cultures. And we also have those who are neurodivergent, who are not necessarily neurotypical. And how do we begin to embrace people from all different walks of life? At the moment, the social media is really more about conditioning people to look a particular way, to talk a particular way, and that is not positive. That is not going to get us to to that kind of humane society that we all are working towards. So yes, social media does have its pluses in terms of being able to access a range of information with much more ease. I mean, the way people can access information online now is not the way it used to be. So I think that is very positive. But the content that is on there really, we do need to have a lot more institutions, the schools, the spiritual centers to begin to align our children towards a much more authentic approach, to go within, to understand that they are actually enough as they are, wherever they're coming from. And that sense of self, that self awareness, the mindfulness, being more intentional, understanding they need to look after themselves. This is key. Our young girls beginning to understand who they are. They are empowered, they can stand, and they can have a voice. These are the things that I do want to see much more across the board, but I do not see enough of it. There are some pockets of excellence, but it does need to become more mainstream.
It definitely needs to be more mainstream. One of the things that we talk about often on this show, and I'd love to hear both of you, and I'll start with you, Bola, and everything, is this notion of, and both of you are very confident women and very sure of yourselves, and that is a wonderful thing and a wonderful trait. But I do know that there is a notion of the imposter syndrome. I know that there have been jobs, even jobs here at this Cultural Arts Center, that I haven't gone for because I've talked myself out of them. And as I mentioned earlier, still even in that early '60s space, there have been relationships that I have bypassed because I have talked myself out of it as well. So I was just wondering, how do you deal with that inner critic? Because we all have that inner critic, and that inner critic can be our worst enemy, and all along those lines. So I was just wondering, and I'll start with you, Bola, but I definitely want to hear from Shadaya as well. How do you fight that inner critic? Because I know that that can be something that has cost us many an opportunity, whether it's personal jobs or a number of other things. But I'll start with you, Bola, but
Mhm.
definitely want to hear from you as well,
Yeah.
Mrs. Nelson. But how do you deal with that inner critic?
I think the inner critic is in all of us. This is that voice that we've been conditioned with right from childhood that tells us we're not enough. And it is something that we do need to come to acknowledge. And this is where my work comes in. This is where we are understanding that the inner critic is there. But there's also that sense of love. There's also that infinite intelligence within us. But it takes practice because the inner critic is dominant. That is that dominant self that is within us. But we can come to learn with practice. We can't just say, I want to get rid of the inner critic. We really have to dedicate and be committed to it, because we have to begin to rewire parts of our minds, hold different beliefs about ourselves, think differently about ourselves. And then we can begin to see a different reflection, the jobs that we couldn't apply for, the things we could not say, the boundaries we could not set. And this is where we can come to see a different reality around us when we begin to acknowledge and rewire those beliefs that have held us back. But it's a journey. There will never be a time when the inner critic disappears. It's always there. It's about how we come to manage it and how we come to develop a different sense of self, a different rewiring in our mind. And this is not just in the head. There's the heart, because we have three brains. There's the head brain, the heart brain, and the gut brain. So those three brains have to come to a place of love. We've got to come back to love, because just as the inner critic is talking about how we're not good enough, there has to be a strong sense of self that is also talking about how lovable, how loved, how supported we are. And it's real. This happens. And this is really where I work with my clients to come to a place where they are developing that sense of love within self. And it's also some things I talk about in my book.
Gotcha. What's your take on that, Shadaya? How do you deal with that inner critic and everything? And I'm glad that Bola brought up something, because that's something else I was going to get into in this conversation as well. But how do you deal with that inner critic? Because I'm sure that with all of the various things that you've been involved in the arts, that there were times that you have fought that as well.
Mark, my name is pronounced Shadia.
Shadia, I'm sorry. I keep mixing up. So my fault.
No
Shadia.
problem.
Yeah.
Yes, Bola, I definitely agree. It all starts with self-love, and that having those intentional, loving thoughts of yourself, getting to that place is not always easy to do. I read a really great book called Atomic Habits, I believe, by James Gladwell, where you can make incremental changes little by little to build better and healthy habits. And one of the key things is just making it easier and creating an incentive how you can start to build better habits. Whether it's in the morning when you're getting ready, you're brushing your teeth, washing your face, and saying, I love myself. And really look in your eyes while you're looking in the mirror, saying, I love myself, I love myself. And it's so important. Thinking about writing down answering the question, who are you? Hmm, let me start to really pull back the layers and see who I really am. And let's think about, okay, what is my purpose here? Let me figure what that is. What is my mission? When you start to really discover who you are, and then you believe, and then you start to see, oh, I'm amazing. This is how I continue to be accepting and loving all the little things, the things that would maybe bother you at different times, like, oh, my feet look some kind of way, or I wish I could do this better, or I wish I knew how to do this. Whatever that is that you would like to work on, make a list, and little by little, what you can do to work on building those habits to create what you want, whether it's financial habits, whether it's eating healthier or taking a walk every week to help clear your mind, if that helps. If it's working out every day, that's part of your regular thing, or drumming for me is great therapy. Whew, let me drum this out. And even writing and listening to music, that creative space is always a healing space for me. So finding what makes you happy and finding your own passion, and little by little, I think a combination of reading Bola's book, building in those daily healthy habits, and looking through the journey of thought through my books as in seeing where the healing is. And hearing and reading other people's stories, I think can also provide a healing, like, oh wait, they thought that too? Oh, okay. And having that sense of being able to relate and what's common, I think is also really empowering as well. So little by little, loving on yourself.
Yeah, that
Keep
makes a
that
lot
love
of sense.
cycle on repeat.
No, definitely have to do that. And Shadia, along those same lines and everything. And you kind of mentioned it, Bola, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. I do have one other guest that I'm going to bring in shortly and everything that just got ready to join us, and we'll change a little bit of the dynamics because it's a male voice that'll be joining us as well. But I was just wondering, Shadia, because one of the things that I think that we don't do enough of, and Bola kind of alluded to it, is in my mind, I think that there are four aspects of our personality, and a lot of times we pay attention to one or the other but ignore another, because I think that a lot of times there is the mental, the physical, the emotional, and I would argue the spiritual as well, but I don't know that we pay enough attention to all four of the aspects and everything. But I'd love to hear your thoughts around that, Shadia, because I don't know that we do enough of that conversation with ourselves, because sometimes we'll leave out one of those aspects, whether it's spiritual, whether it's emotional, whether it's the mental, or one of the others. But I sometimes think that we don't do a good enough job of making sure that we are trying to develop the total us and everything. But I'd love to hear your thoughts around that.
Yeah, another book I would suggest is by a dear friend. Her name is Octavia Yearwood. Her book is entitled "How the Hell Did You Do That?" So she tells her story in her book, and at the end of each chapter, she has three or four questions that help you to navigate self-reflection on where I'm at this point in my life. And writing and reading and doing the work in her book definitely helped get me to this space of like, okay, I'm ready to share my work with the world. I think I feel I'm more confident in who I am and how I'm presenting my creative work to the world now. And now I think, it's interesting when I started to share my poetry with smaller circles, and then they're like, wow, I relate to this. Like, you wrote this for me. How did you know? And then the kids reading my plays, and they're like, wow, I wish I knew this sooner, but now I have it. Now I can apply it and transfer it to my other relationships and friendships. So thinking about how we can be intentional and doing the work for yourself and not giving up on yourself, I think is so important. So when you have a tool to help delve in to work on yourself is so, so critical. Even creating a vision board and what do you want to see for your life, I think is so powerful. And you look at that every day, and little by little, you work toward building those habits to create the life that you want for yourself. And be gentle. I think it's important to also be gentle with yourself with the process and being patient and being compassionate to yourself along the way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What's your take on that, Bola? Because, like I said, a lot of your work is in this space, and I don't think that enough of us pay enough attention to all of the aspects of our personality.
Hmm. Thank you, Mark. I believe we are energy beings. I'm an energy practitioner. And when I finished my degree in psychology, I went into counseling. And there's a lot of value in talking about our trauma imprints and and the memories that we have had. But I do not believe that we can be emotionally free until we align to that energy self that we are. This is that spiritual self that we are. We have five energy layers. We have the physical, this physical body is only one layer. We do have the aura around us that contains the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. We do, no, there is there's the physical, then there's the etheric, the mental, emotional, and the spiritual. So those five layers do constitute who we are, and they contain information about us that over a long period of time, over lifetimes. So we cannot just focus on one lifetime. So we do not have the full information if we're only looking at our day to day in our physical bodies. And this is why we can be in therapy for donkey's years and still find ourselves finding it difficult to cope with our day to day. If we do not connect to that energy, that spiritual self that we are, we will not be emotionally free. Being able to really integrate all the different emotions within us and be able to step free into that place where we are being our true authentic self. And the creativity that we have when we are in this place is very different because we find ourselves being able to do a gazillion things with much more ease. This is the difference. The difference between embracing that spiritual self, that energy being that we are, is the ease and flow that we begin to see, the synchronicity with things around us. We're finding a parking space. We're thinking of somebody and they call us. The synchronicity of life that is naturally there. We begin to trust ourselves more. We're beginning to realize that people want to do business with those they trust. If you have two business people, if you want to buy something and you are looking at the what's that sense? How do you make that decision? It's about energy. We are really looking at how our intuition is guiding our day to day. And when we become more aligned to our energy self, we will find ourselves being able to be guided much more intuitively in our business, in our personal lives, where we find it easier to set boundaries. We find it easier to make decisions. And this is what I have found working with a number of various teachers. And psychology did not teach me this. This is what I learned as an energy practitioner. So, yes, it's something that I don't think we can ignore. Otherwise, we will be in trauma recovery and counseling and therapy for years, and it will still be quite overwhelming in this particular reality.
And along those same lines, and this is for both of you, but I'll start with you, Shaddai, and everything. But do you feel that we pay enough attention? Because I know that there was a time, and I have not done this much because lately I've been spending too much time inside and not enough time outside. But I was wondering, how do you connect to Mother Nature? Because I think that that is definitely part of the culture, both within the native culture as well as the African culture and a number of other cultures that I try to do when I do get out because I enjoy seeing even a simple butterfly or a errant rabbit, or if I'm going to mom's house, seeing the deer that are in her backyard and all along those lines, or the turkeys that are in her backyard as well. But I know a lot of times when we get into that rush life, we oftentimes ignore the wonderments of nature and even some of the education that nature can give us as well. I am convinced, and I'll just give you my theory, and I could be wrong in everything, but there was a very traumatic event that happened almost 20 plus years ago and all along those lines, and that was the 9/11 attack that took place. And as I recall it, I literally remember it was almost like God above sent a message to the birds and even some of the vermin, like the rats and other things, because as I recall it, literally the day after, and I've heard people say something similar about the pandemic, the animals got like that DNA message that you are about to get really stupid. Y'all might want to go into hiding and all along those lines. So that is my
Mm.
belief system because I literally don't remember, as you know, because you've been in North Carolina, there are literally birds that fly all around the area. And I don't remember seeing any for several days after that attack. It was like they got a memo from God that people about to get crazy. So we're getting ready to disappear or y'all might want to hide. And I was just wondering, do you think that we pay enough attention to the signals that come either from our dreams or from Mother Nature? Because you earlier mentioned Baba Chuck, and I still consider him to be an ancestor that I sometimes might get messages from, just like I get them from my grandmother who founded the first African American library in Raleigh and all along those lines. So I was wondering, do you feel that we pay enough attention to one, the ancestors, and to two, Mother Nature? And then I'd love to hear from Bola as well. Richard Dyer first.
Yes, Shadia.
I thought I said it right. My fault, Shadia.
You had it right the other time.
Gotcha.
Well, with connecting with nature, I love looking at any vast body of water. And I have a beautiful lake view where I get to be centered every morning or while I'm working at my desk. I can glance over and look at the lake view. Something about looking at a body of water that is so restorative, I feel refreshed, and it puts everything in perspective and of gratitude and thinking about, okay, this is whatever challenge it may be, this is for me for quiet and listening. I think is so invaluable, whether it's just walking around the lake or walking and getting that crisp air while it's cold here in Miami, 50, 60 degrees. It's the perfect walking weather to get out and appreciate where we're at. And as far as the ancestors, that is something that is always celebrated through the African culture, which I am so happy to be a part of, continuing the sharing our narrative through dance and drumming and storytelling with Delu Africa. I think it's important that we always honor our ancestors. Even with the organization that I work with, we provide a rite of passage ceremony celebrating young people for that, making that passage into young adulthood and having the coaches to support them, the parents as coaches, and as our mentors also as coaches, and the elders as the anchors of the community. It's important that we're working as a village to support the young people through this transition, and while always honoring our ancestors, so that's how we're here. And then doing that as well through my poetry, honoring our history and telling our stories that aren't being told. A lot of the information that I was looking for through the pandemic and telling our narratives, it's hard to find. So I would find like little bit here, a little bit there, and then putting it all in context is so invaluable. So I thought it was important to make sure that our narratives are preserved, and so we can continue telling our stories.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What about you, Bola? Do you think we pay enough attention to the ancestors and also even Mother Nature, as I was saying earlier, or is that something that is needs to be done more, even in that energy work that you are part of as well?
Mm. Thank you, Mark. Honestly, I think we probably, because I'm Nigerian, I traveled here to the UK when I was 18.
Mm.
So I'm very familiar with, that kind of understanding of our social networks need to include our family members from as far back as great grandmothers or grandmothers. Um, it is less than it used to be, sadly. We used to connect and act as a whole system a lot more in the past. And we are now much more focused on success and moving away from that. And but it's I think we swung right, that pendulum swung right to the right, away from the family structure, and we're coming back into, but it's still pockets of excellence, pockets of people connected more with each other. It needs to be more. Because you see, our ancestors, we carry in our DNA this imprints that we will see patterns. I can see patterns in my life that my grandmother had, that my great grandmother had, that my mother had. And it's about how we can begin to look at the power and the disempowerment, because there's a need for ancestral healing, and there's also a need for an ancestral reclaiming. We need to reclaim the power that our ancestors. We're standing on their shoulders. I'm standing on the shoulders of my mother, and I'm seeing the woman that she was. I'm seeing the woman that my grandmother was, a very enterprising and successful woman. I'm looking at my grandfather and how he created an industry out of nothing. But I'm also looking at our the kind of colonial masters disempowered us, and the impact of that. We need to begin to go back to source. And this is where nature also comes in very powerfully, because within nature is the frequency of the divine. This is why we feel at peace when we connect with nature, because we're connecting back to source. And this is missing in our day-to-day mainstream a lot of the times. So it's intentional. Nature, connecting to nature has to be intentional, but there is a reason for it. Connecting back to our ancestors also has to be intentional. There is nothing in our environment that encourages us to connect to our ancestors. We're meant to leave it behind. And the youth of today need to be reminded that family is number one.
Yeah.
Charity does have to begin at home.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. Get ready to bring in Chad, who's my other guest, and all along those lines. But before I do that, I'll start with you, Shadia, and all along those lines. But one of the things that I was curious about, because both of you are authors, and you've mentioned poetry a couple of times, so I want to know if we could get actually a sample of your work and all along those lines. So if there's some piece that maybe you've got memorized, Shadia, that you can share with our audience, and then I want to hear a piece of the soul bites as well. But Shadia, I'll start off with you. Is there something that you can share with our global audience?
Yes, thank you. This one is entitled Cyclical Reproduction. This poem is featured in the 3-part play series where she kept her bra on, the chronicles of a teenage love affair. Generations producing teen baby mama drama, kids raising kids, can alone keep up with school, not even thinking about the FCAT, yet thinking she look a real cute pregnant, thinking that she got that baby daddy on lock, that he gonna change for her. Yeah, he gonna change from being right where he wanted to be to the next piece of candy that was easy to get. Stop falling into the delusions and living an illusion. Kids creating their own rite of passage, blindly down a tunnel of pain, hardship, and being alone. Because it was cool to do it because he said, I love you. Because I want my baby to have pretty curly hair and green eyes, someone I can dress up, and someone I can show up. And I'm a woman now. Not realizing that the same cat spent lines on the corner and make them bet to see which one they can get at next. Not realizing this is all part of a game where the girl is not meant to win. Cyclical reproduction. Sharing needles and swapping juices like the Kool-Aid is free. Selling HIV and AIDS like a 2-for-1 special. Looking real nice with some bling. It wasn't supposed to hurt. He said that he loved me. He said that he would marry me. He said he'd be there for me and our baby. He said, wow, he said a lot of things. He said what I wanted to hear and what I wanted to believe. I wanted to believe all the lies to be true, like he not loving me anymore than I love myself. I'm going to keep holding on because he's going to change. Right now, I'm stuck paying doctor bills, no job, no future to look forward. I can't have this baby. I can't keep recycling generations' illusions and calling it real, because the reality is HIV is the only bond between he, me, and his baby we share. A bond he ain't even trying to hear or deal with. He'd rather continue sharing his infection and perfection just so he can get an erection. Please, This is my objection. Stop the cyclical reproduction.
Wow. That was great, very powerful, and all along those lines and everything. Definitely caught a message and definitely something. Before I get to Bola's piece and everything, and definitely wanted to introduce Chad to the audience as well. That piece actually brings up something that I don't think we talk about enough in society and everything, and that is the whole notion, because I know I've been guilty of it, of the rescue personality, or that personality that you're always trying to rescue folks, and sometimes they got to want to be rescued, and sometimes we have that savior personality, for lack of a better term. I think there's another term that people use for it as well. But I was just wondering, is that part of what the poem is dealing with? Because I do know that a lot of times we are trying to be people pleasers and rescue folks, even though we sometimes need to rescue ourselves before we can rescue others. But I just wondered, is that where your mindset was with that poem and everything, Shadia? Because definitely that's where I was going as I was hearing it from you, is knowing that I've been through that a couple of times my own self, where you're trying to change people, even though sometimes they're not ready to be changed, and sometimes they don't need to be changed.
Hmm. Yeah, some people, particularly I find in some of the culture with young people thinking like, oh, okay, well, it looks cute to be pregnant. It's about being cute and trying to be accepted, or because they don't feel that they're getting enough love from their own household. So now they feel like, well, let me create something or someone that I can love on. And so now I can have someone love me back because that love is not there. I think it provokes critical dialogue about why. It's not just about getting pregnant and wanting that emotional bond and connection and wanting to be accepted and thinking I'm going to keep, snag this cute guy or snag this cute girl and think that my life is going to be great without realizing the bigger picture of what they're getting themselves into. So it's important for young people to realize that their choices have real consequences. And what does that look like? And the reason, always asking with why. And I think it's important just talking to kids and hearing their perspective, and even as adults, why are you making these choices, and what is it that you really want? So I think it's important to have this critical dialogue
And Shadia, I don't think it's
that starts
just
with self-love.
yeah, Shadia, I don't think it's just young people, because I know that a lot of times people will get caught up, and it's not just women, it's men as well, in this materialism or this status symbol. Because I know a number of folks that are wanting the person with the quote unquote right job, or the quote unquote right house, the quote unquote right car, the quote unquote right this or that. And I think that that is something that goes on quite often, not just with our teenagers, but also with the adults as well. But I just wonder your take on that, because I think that that's something that even our adult population gets caught up in as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's not just for young people. It's definitely for adults to think about the why and what is it that it means to you. I mean, for me as a parent, I wanted to be a mom, not someone just because I wanted to love on and to add so much value and contribute to the world, and also a create opportunity to create this legacy. I think it's unfortunate that some people look to other people or look outside of themselves for the answer to feel that they are accepted, or looking for recognition or validation, or to be seen, or getting so many likes or followers on social media to feel some sense of value, or feel like they are somebody that someone needs to save them, when all they have to do is look within themselves, which is not always an easy thing to do. It's always important to take that time to delve into the why and why we're here, and what do you feel that you can contribute the most. And the patterns of unhealthy energy that's being attracted into your life can change when you change your thoughts as well.
You know, no
To
doubt.
more
Before I
healthy
get
ones.
to Bola and the thought from her soul bites and everything, just want to introduce folks to Chad Patterson, who is a mindset coach. And I know one of the things he talks about is something we've been talking about even during the course of this conversation, which is overcoming challenges and limiting self belief. So I just wondered if you want to share a little bit about your work and the things that you are doing, because a lot of the conversation we've been having for this last hour has involved a lot of what I think your work is in, because you talk about building healthy and strong relationships, and definitely those limited self beliefs, as well as being fully engaged in all dimensions of your life, even in the leadership spaces. So if you'll share a little bit about what your book is about and what you've got going on as well. And then, like I said, I definitely want to bring
Yeah.
the gold bites.
Wow. So, well, Mark, it's an honor to be on here. And I think Shadia and Bola, I've been listening for about the last 20 minutes. And I think the best thing I can do is really just shut up and keep listening. Y'all shared some great insights and wisdom. So I'm honored to join the conversation. I don't want to take away from anything that's been said before. So I love, Shadia, what you were talking about. And when I think about, so I'm a leadership coach. I work with executives. I work with business owners. But coaching to me is not about the role. It's just about the person. And so when I think about mindset and beliefs, you were reminding me, Shadia, about y'all have heard of this. It's called the locus of control. It's a behavioral theory that's been around a long time. And it's been a game changer for me because even in my faith, and I'm a Christian. That's my belief system. That's my worldview. I think whatever higher power, whatever our values are, we base our life on those values. And for me, I believe in the internal locus of control, where that says Chad's going to take full ownership of his actions, his choices, his life. Even in the worst of circumstances, I choose still how I respond, and I have free will to make those choices, and I have to live with the consequences, versus the person who blames their life on everything else and takes no ownership or no responsibility. That's not to say some horrible, terrible things happen to people and they have no choice in that. So I don't want to minimize the pain of that, but I'm a big believer when I sit down with myself in the mirror first, or if I'm coaching a leader, I think it all starts with, we have to take full ownership of who we are, the good and the bad, the choices that we make. And that it's really, the world for me is not about me. It's about how I can make life better for others. And I put that the best I can in the context of leadership, because I think leaders, Mark, have an opportunity to serve. And I think we sometimes become boss holes and make the world about ourselves versus being a servant leader who's there to love and honor and respect the people under our authority. And so I'm injecting in a really awesome conversation. I hope that resonates
No,
with
that
someone
actually does
somehow.
resonate,
So
and it actually ties into something
I'm
that
just
I'm going
honored.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it ties into something I'm going to bring in for everybody, including yourself, because one of the things that I have gotten frustrated by, and I've said to several times on this show and other shows, is I consider myself more spiritual than religious. And part of the reason that I say that is because I'm not saying all, but a lot of religions get caught up in what I call the cult of personality and a lot of that kind of aspect. And they don't pay enough attention to the actual messaging and the actual well-being of society. And I've heard a couple of people that have stated that they feel, and I'd love to hear first from Bola, but definitely also hear from you, Chad, that they feel that we are entering into a new age of enlightenment. And I've had some people that have actually said that they consider me, and I'm glad to get this compliment, to be somewhat empathic, and probably why I do good in this interview space, even though I'm been butchering Shadia's name today, but that's just been a minor glitch considered the rest of the conversation and all along the lines of everything else and everything. But that being said, I do feel that we might be going in a newer, more positive direction, despite all the negativity that is going on in the world. So maybe we got to get this out of our system before we can move into this new era of enlightenment and everything. But Bola, I'll start with you and everything, because like I said, that has been my frustration. And it's not just Christianity, it's other religions as well that sometimes get in this my way or the highway kind of attitude in my thought pattern. And I personally think that it's my personal opinion. Others don't have to agree with me, but I think there are going to be some shocked people when they get up to heaven, because they might see some people up there that they weren't expecting to be up there, and all along those lines. But I'm just wondering your thoughts about this new era of enlightenment, Bola. And then I'd love to hear from Chad and Shadia as well. But definitely your thoughts. Are we moving into a new era of enlightenment?
I think so. I think so. I think there are more and more people who are becoming more spiritual. And this is about free will, and it's not about right or wrong. I think it's important for everyone to come and explore their themes. We've all come to explore different themes, and this is the joy of being on planet Earth. There are so many different things to explore, but there has to be an attention to good, an attention to non-judgment, and attention to us being much more intentional around how we serve and how we develop our relationships with our own self and with others, regardless of whether we're doing religion or spirituality. But there is a new age of enlightenment, and by enlightenment, I mean an alignment to light, an alignment to love. There are more people calling out for that than ever before, and I think 2020 had something to do with that. So yes, and I would like to read a passage from my book, if
Please
that's
do.
okay.
Please do.
This is because it's really relevant to what we're talking about. It's about compassion. And I talk about how compassion is the act, is that act of suffering to give ourselves compassion must be learned. It must be learned. We cannot assume that it is something that will come to us without practice. When something unexpected happens and we have been triggered to react in fear, it is often not possible to be rational in that heat of the moment. We would often struggle to pause, to hold the belief that we are safe, loved, and can have our peace. It is sometimes only in reflection after the event that we can remember our empowering beliefs and come to cherish them. When we can choose to reflect, to say to ourselves, what happened to me back then? Or how did it happen that way? Or how can I get through this? And to ask and truly be open and honest with the answers that come to us. It is this reflection that grows our self awareness and compassion for ourselves and for life. Reflection allows us to examine what that particular experience was meant to give to us along our way for our growth. It is for our expansion. Reflection with kind compassion, practiced again and again, softens us and allows us to really receive the gift of each experience for living our best self every day. So, this is a chapter on compassion from my book, Daily Soul Bites.
That was deep. Definitely very powerful and everything along those lines. Definitely more people need to get to that book and understand the notion of compassion and everything. Chad, just really quickly, how do you address compassion even in your leadership space and everything? Because I do know that that's something that you talk about as well. And some people even define your speaking style as being compassionate and all along those lines. But I know that one of the things that I oftentimes hear people talk about, and I know I've got a number of friends in this lane, and I definitely think that coaching is very important. And they say even the best coaches need coaches, but there are some people that are of the opinion that we have got a overabundance of coaches, and they sometimes try to figure out how they can separate the bad from the good. I tried to use another analogy, but I couldn't think of the wheat from the chaff, I think is the word I was looking for, and everything. But I was just wondering, for those that are thinking, hey, Chad's another leadership coach, and they've had a bunch of leadership coaches on Pride TV and everything, what makes him a better leadership coach, and why should I get Leadership Heart Unleashed?
Oh, wow. Well, better. I'm just trying to do my part, Mark. So my book is Leadership Heart Unleashed. And man, Bola, I loved what you had to say about compassion. The premise of my book is basically core values. Heart is an acronym. First, I've got to have my heart right and full in every dimension before I can even think about leading others. And for me, leading starts with love. And even in my faith, love is action. It's a verb. You know, if there's a passage, love is patient, it is kind, it is. So love is kind of an overused word. I think it's more about the actions, the specific ways that love shows up in and through us every day with the people that we love, live, and serve. And so when I think about compassion, Mark, for me, one of the greatest way to love people in the context of leadership is to set really high hopes and expectations for our people, to show them that they have incredibly high value, you know, that we were called and created for excellence, not mediocrity. And I joke with people that most of us don't wake up and say, oh, I can't wait to be mediocre today. You know, that's not the bar. That's not the mindset. That's not the joy of living. The joy is in the purpose that we've been given, and we have the opportunity to deliver that to planet Earth every day. And so for me as a leadership coach, I want to make sure that people, the leaders, take full ownerships of their gifts and their talents and the uniqueness that they bring to the table. I tell my team every day, I'm glad there's only one Chad. We need the uniqueness and the gifts that every life has to offer. And so for me, the greatest act of love and compassion is to help to set that person free and to give them the encouragement and the support and the challenge. I think love is also, if you love me enough, you're going to tell me the truth. So I talk a lot about feedback. I think we need feedback in our lives to make sure we don't have blind spots, and blind spots lead to arrogance sometimes. And so for me as a coach, if I can set a person free to be the amazing person they were created to be, that's one of the greatest responsibilities I feel like I have as a coach. So it's that right balance of support, but it's also bringing that right level of tension or challenge to make sure that we hold each other accountable, frankly, is what I'm trying to say. So for me, love shows up in action and accountability, and just being raw and real with people. The world is hungry for raw and real compassion and love. And so enough with the fake stuff. Let's be real and raw and honest, and let's get after it.
And along those same lines, and I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts about this, but I think that in both business as well as life and just relationships and a number of other things, that we don't pay enough attention to personality types. And this even comes down to Shadia as well, because I do have a dear friend of mine that is in the political lanes, and that they have actually had some uh, conversations around the different personality types that exist and how that can impact our education system and all along those lines. So Kelly Jones, who is a friend of mine, talks about this and has had some experiences even with dealing with Panda. And anybody that knows about health and education knows that pandas are sometimes harder to educate and all along those lines. But I was just, and they're part of somewhat the autism community and all along those lines. But I just wondered, do you feel, and this is for everybody, but I'll start with you, Shadia, that we pay enough attention in the corporate America or even in the artistic world, or definitely even in our friendship circles, to understanding the various personality types that exist? Because I know that even in some of my own jobs, I have done better with certain management styles than others. I do probably better with those. I always forget which one is micro and which one is macro, but the ones that allow you more freedom is the ones that I do better with. And all along those lines, where there are some others that are a little bit more controlling and like to be involved in everything. Like I said, I would get micro and macro mixed up, but you can clarify which one is which in answering the questions. But I don't know that we always, one, understand the personality types, and two, do enough around understanding micro and macro, even in the arts world. But I'd love your take on that as somebody that has been in arts administration, in addition to being an artist yourself.
I think the arts creates like a neutral zone as far as what your true intention is. So, what other activity or project you're focused on doesn't necessarily have to be about the other person and what that person type is. If that person can help you get to be or to see, that's where the goal and that's where the focus is. It's not about me and you being best friends. I don't need that. I need to make sure that I am making the meaningful connections to help support. And I think it would be more helpful for more people to have that pay it forward attitude of gratitude. How can I help you? How, there's a lot of information and a lot of ways to go about meeting certain goals. But when you have people who are successful in different areas and parts of the industry where you can learn key fundamentals, where there isn't really like a straight checklist of what to do as an entrepreneur or how I can succeed as a professional dancer, how I can, succeed as an amazing published author, or how do you become a best-selling author? How can I can be the best person I can be? How do I lead through compassion? I think one of the things as also being a manager is leading with compassion. It's something to take the time to just asking, how are you? Not a how are you and keep going and not wait for a response, but a genuine how are you goes a long, long way. Of place of being supportive and creating that listening ear, even if it's just for that couple of minutes or that 1 minute to think and just take that time to be listened to. It's not often people ask me how I'm doing. So anytime someone genuinely asks how I'm doing, I'm so thankful. I'm like, wow, do you really want to know? Or do I'm going to give you the surface answer? Let me give you a general answer, depending on who it is. Or is it like a real thoughtful answer? Like, really, right now, I really need some more sleep. Or is it, yeah, I'm okay. I'm doing enough. Or, so I think having those compassionate moments is definitely meaningful to have. Even with my little one, I think it's important to have these compassionate conversations with the young people and help them lead in their different areas of their life. Because even asking the young people that I work with, when they see my relationship with my daughter, and they're like, wow, I wish my so and so would ask me every day how I'm doing or how is school. Like those conversations, they just don't happen, whether they're at the table or at all, or on the way home, or if the kids are walking home, whatever that may be. And even as an adult to adult and working in the workspace, in the art industry, I think it's important to really support each other. I think we can definitely grow and build a lot more and make more of an impact, especially if you want to use art as a form of activism, art as a way of making sure we're controlling our narratives. I think it's so important. It can definitely be more powerful when we all work toward that goal of self-expression. Could be a collective impact.
And even to that space and everything, and I'm actually going to get to a thing that is outside of the arts, but it is something that I am passionate about as well, which is to some degree sports and all along those lines. And I am a fan. I've actually got their shirt on today because I am a alumni of Marquette, and I definitely enjoy some of the leadership tactics, even though it didn't show yesterday because we got killed by Princeton, that Shaka Smart has put out there and all along those lines. So he's definitely got this notion of it is not just one man, it is not just about having one star, and it is the next man up kind of a philosophy. And he also talks about energy generating behaviors, which include everything from slaps on the floor, which I know Duke was also very big on, and high fives and other things that can create positive energy. So he definitely seems to have a leadership kind of mindset. And there are a number of young coaches like him that are developing this notion of tapping into not just being about a one superstar and making sure that the team is connected. I think they even did a cooking exercise. I've heard a couple of the commentators talk about where they literally went and cooked like an Italian dish, even though I don't know that any of the players are from Italy, but it was doing that team building kind of exercise. So Chad, I'll start with you. Do you think that these kind of team building exercises, because I've even seen corporations, I'm here in the RTP, that do a number of these kind of things, and they do seem like they work. But I was just wondering your take on these team building exercises and energy connecting as well as part of the team building. Chad?
Yeah, so I go back to something I heard Bola say earlier, just the energy sharing. And, for me, again, it goes back to if I'm going to be fully engaged, my cup has to be full in every dimension. So when I put that into context of sports or team, so quick story, I am currently a master's level power lifter only because my daughter double dog dared me 2 years ago, and she's my strength coach. And anyway, so why would I do powerlifting I'm 58 years old? What the flip flop, right? Well, it engages me physically and mentally, and I know without a shadow of a doubt that my performance as a leader, as a husband, as a man has gone up. There is a direct connection between our physical energy, our mental mindset, and our performance as leaders. So I'm a big believer in kinetics and activities. I think team building, where you get people moving together, it's very contagious and it does create energy. I'm a big believer in that. So I think the physical contact, it's sad that we live in a day now. I'm a hugger. So if I was in the room with y'all and I spent more than 5 minutes with you, my inclination would be, oh man, can I just give you a hug? Right? I love the human connection. Obviously, we have to be very cautious and careful and appropriate with that. But I think the vitamin that we get from human touch sometimes, unfortunately, is so guarded now. I think that's even a missing element, that people-to-people contact is important. And sometimes we get that in sports. intentionally and unintentionally. People are touching. Believer, Mark, that it's great to sit at the table and eat meals together. There's something special about gathering together and breaking bread, frankly. So I joke with people, I bribe and beg people to join me for breakfast and lunch just so I can hang out with them and learn from them. I encourage our team to spend time together eating. So as corny as that sounds, I think there's a lot of value in physical activity with people. And I think there's a lot of value around eating and meeting around the table together. I think those are very direct correlations that do show up on the court for Marquette or wherever we're performing. I do think there's a direct correlation.
No, I can definitely see that. Hey, Bola, along those same lines, and then I'll definitely get to Shadia as well and everything, because I've actually got to ask a slightly um, interesting question based on something that Chad just brought up and everything. But do you sometimes get, because one of the things that I spend way too much time, probably will do it later on today, eating out or sometimes doing the DoorDash, but also going to restaurants. And I do know that sometimes when I'm out in those environments, it is quite interesting to see people that are literally supposed to be there, either whether it's a family gathering or a meeting, but they're spending just as much time on their social media outlets, having conversations with who knows who, and all along those lines. So I just wondering your take on that, because that's something that I'm sometimes going like, wait a minute, aren't you supposed to be here on a family outing? And Joe is on his tablet talking to who knows who, and the same with Sally. And sometimes they might even be husband and wife having these conversations. We won't even talk about what the kids are doing. But I just wondered your take on that, and is that something that is hopefully we're going to see a shift in this new energy shift?
Yes, thank you, Mark. Honestly, I'm agreeing with everything that Shad and Shadia are saying about how we do need to, first of all, fill our own cup. And we do need to begin to look at how we can begin to move away from that sense of being an individual. When we're in a team is all about commonality. And commonality in what? Commonality in our connection to source. What do we have in common? We are all part of source. We're all part of that infinite intelligence. And whatever activities, whatever team building activities we're involved in, it has to be activities that are connecting us, reminding us that we are all one. We're all part of that infinite nature. So whether we are talking about stories where we have shared some experiences from the past, whether we're all talking about something that is filling our own cup, something that we have experienced as individuals in childhood or as adults that connects us to each other. We have to come together in union, and that union has to be a clarity of goals. Commonality is key. However we achieve that commonality, however we achieve that sense of oneness, it's not about personalities. We have to come away from that, and we have to begin to realize in a team that we are all of one frequency. And how we do that is very different depending on the culture. Some cultures use music, some cultures use dance, some cultures use stories. But the bottom line is we're moving away from that individual sense of self, and we're moving into that understanding that we are all of one nature, that frequency, that energy frequency, because it's from that place that we can then begin to operate, to carry out all those different activities with an understanding of that oneness. And this is what happens even when you are a mother. I'm a mother. I've got two sons now in their 20s. There is an understanding that all the teams, whether it's their college, whether it's my aunt or whoever, we all have one thing in mind, and that's the best interest of that child. And once we're all coming from that, once we all understand that goal, this is the goal that we all need to clarify. Everything else comes together as a team. So we've got to find that commonality, and that commonality has to be of a high frequency. It has to be of love. That is the only thing that gets teams moving. That is the only thing that moves crowds and changes minds. It's the high frequency. So that's my take on leadership.
No, definitely agree with you on that. Shadia, any thoughts around that? And also this notion of how some of our kids, because you do some education, and it's not just kids, I said this earlier, it's also the adults that are self-absorbed and oftentimes not paying attention to the people that are in the same room with them and all along those lines is with the point that I was making earlier and everything. But I was wondering your take on that because I'm sure you even see that there in Miami and even in some of the different environments that you've gone to.
Yeah, it's a combination of with the young people. It's funny, I joke with them, and they could be sitting right next to each other. He's texting the person right next to each other. I said, "Why are y'all texting? Yeah, y'all can just talk. Just talk. Put the phone down and just have a conversation." Same thing could be done at the table. I've seen when I've taken kids out. I think sometimes when young people are in a room full of adults, they're not always comfortable on how to navigate the relationships or how to talk to some of the adults in the room without feeling like they're going to be asked a million questions that they don't want to answer. Like, okay, please don't ask me about school. Please don't ask me about this. Please. No, can I just not talk to you? So another way to shut you out, I'm going to be on my phone, or I'm going to put my, headphones or, AirPods in, and they could not be on. They could not be listening to music or anything. They could not even be on. They could not even really be doing anything productive on their phone, just to make it look like they're engaged in something, so then they could pretend like, oh, I didn't hear them, purposely. So some of them use it as more of a tactic to shut everything out. And maybe it's an awesome another opportunity for them to concentrate on writing something, or maybe they want to learn a new song, or where they're focusing on working on a new dance routine, or looking up for a really cool food recipe. I think it's important to not always assume that when you see young people engage in screen time that it's always something negative or not productive, or a lot of their homework is online, so they have to be on their phones, or if they don't have a laptop. I think there's also an important balance of understanding of useless screen time and productive. And when we can create intentional time to have meaningful social interactions with each other, it's so powerful. And I think, unfortunately, we're still seeing a lot, and we'll continue to see the effects of the pandemic, where it was just screen time for years.
Yeah.
That's real, and for some young people, this has been their introduction into school is screen time, which is unfortunate for a lot of the young people. And how do you expect people to just put it down when they had to have it up all day? Like, they had to be in school on screen all day, and that definitely impacted their mental health
Mhm.
and the value of having meaningful in-person contact. Chad, you talked about even the simple touch has really been awkward,
Yeah.
and a lot of different social interactions of, is it okay that I give you a high five? Is it okay I can give you a hug? Uh, Having these intentional conversations, understandings, and maybe missing some important social cues that you don't learn. This is not something that is covered in school,
Mhm.
right? So how do you navigate? I mean, even a lot of adults navigating the social cues you may see or may not see, or be confused, and then don't want to ask and don't want to feel like, oh, but why am I asking the person? Because you don't know. Don't assume. Sometimes when people assume, that's when they get into trouble. Like, oh, whoops, I thought that it was okay. I thought I was invited. I could get a hug. But that wasn't the case. And all hugs are not the same. So some people are not okay with certain types if they're if it triggers something in the person,
Right.
that becomes
Yeah.
unwanted because it brings back a particular memory of something that happened that traumatized that person, for example. So you just never
Yep.
know what that person is coming from. So always lead with compassion, and then when in doubt, just ask.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
I think can go a long way. But when you come from a place of compassion and being genuine, and then maybe making slow approaches, I think can definitely go a long way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As you were saying that, Shadia, and everything, I was actually thinking to myself and everything about a couple of things. One, my two nephews were very good for putting on their Oculus sets because my brothers got them the Oculus set. So sometimes they would just totally be ignoring us and all along those lines because they would be absorbed in whatever games they were in the Oculus, and that definitely they are even sometimes encouraged to those games. 'Cause as you mentioned, some of those games can be educational. They're not always negative games. There can be some educational stuff that is going on in that space as well. And I was also thinking about how, speaking of interpersonal communications, a couple of things crossed my mind. One is I am not always the best person in terms of picking up signals. That's actually been one of my uh, Achilles heels, even in terms of social conversations and everything, even in my own social life, because I don't always pick up cues. I've even been told, I remember way back in those ice ages that I was talking about earlier when I was in college, that there was literally a young lady that was very much interested in me and everything. And of course, my friends didn't tell me that until after the fact, that they were like, "Didn't you pick up the cues?" And I was going like, "No, I didn't recognize that particular week or that particular this was what was going on." And like I said, they've gone on to have a successful married life and a successful life altogether. But who knows what could have been if I had been actually paying attention to social cues and all in that space and everything. And the flip side of that is that sometimes kids can be very wonderful in social cues, because one of the best social cues, or the greatest things that I saw, is I mentioned those nephews, and those nephews, we are very game oriented, meaning when we get together, me, my brother, and my mom, we play spinners, which is like dominoes, and we might play other games as well. And I remember my nephew won one of the games, so he did the masterful thing. If you win the game and you won the game, I think we tried to talk him into playing the next game, and he was like, "No, that's okay. I've won the game. I don't need to play another game because I've already won and everything." So he did not want the rematch for fear that it would destroy his record. So he was 1-0 on that particular day. He stayed 1-0 because he was like, "I'm 1-0. Y'all are not talking me into playing because then I might be 1-1 or 1-2." So he was enjoying the fact that we were trying to talk him into playing another game to get our rematch and to get our uh, kind of like chance to get back in him. And he was like, "No, that's okay. I'm perfectly fine. I won my one match. I don't have to do another match. Y'all are the ones that have to catch me on another day." So that might have been a case of him understanding the notion of winning and winning on that particular day and not wanting to lose his victory. So what are your thoughts, Chad? I think my nephew might have been on a leadership track on that particular day.
You may so our game, the family in our game is Monopoly. If you really want to see the personalities of our family, just pull out the Monopoly game, and it's all on. It's interesting to me. I go back to man, we're all unique. I think ultimately it's my ultimate job. I don't know what you need. My job as a friend, as a brother, as a man is to ask good questions, to listen, to be fully present, and not to impose me on you. And I think part of we have unique personalities. I'm glad we have different flavors of ice cream. They all matter. And I think a lot of times it's just a matter of, like Shadia said, just ask a good question. And then for me, it's shut up and listen, Chad. Don't just project. Don't just assume. I go back to Bola's thought on compassion. For me, part of compassion is I see your value and I'm going to act accordingly to that. So even in a Monopoly game, I'm respectful and loving and still win.
Exactly. I can agree with you on that and everything. I'm getting to wind down. I got one other guest I'm bringing in very shortly, and we some of y'all can leave before I get out and everything, because usually the shows can be anywhere from 2 to 2.5 hours. I will bring in Alan very shortly, but before I get to everything and before we wind down and all along those lines and everything, one thing that I was curious from you Chad, and you, Bola, and then I've got a question for Shadi as well, Shadi and Bola, who have been here the longest and everything. But earlier we were talking about this notion of work-life balance and everything, and I did hear from Shadi how she does it. Bola, you've mentioned having those two young adult sons and everything, and Chad, you've mentioned having a wife and I assume kids as well. So how do the two of you do that work-life balance? And then I'd love to hear from you, Chad, as to how you deal with that the self-critic as well, because I know Bola got to that, but I don't think you did. But definitely for both of you, how do you do with that work-life balance?
Okay, go ahead, Bola. I want to hear your thoughts.
It's a journey. I will not say I have hit the nail on the head just yet. There is such a lifelong experience in parenting. Just when you think your children are independent, that's when you realize that there is more that you need to do with them. I happen to have my first son is severely autistic, so that is something that I have called into this lifetime to experience, and it has led me to go within. So for me, it's about understanding the purpose of my personal life and how that has become a, a tool for my work life. I think it's about understanding purpose. For me, once I understood what my parenting was about, what that journey was about, it made it easier for me to decide exactly what kind of work I wanted to do. But it's been a journey exploring different things, and it's almost like an experiment. You have different passions in your youth, and then as you get older, as you work towards creating that balance, I think intentionality is key. We have got to continue to be intentional and mindful. And that is what I have learned to do, to continue to be intentional and mindful around what I'm doing and around what my personal life is adding to my work life and knowing our priorities. My priority is my family. My kids are my priority. And if we do not know that, we can be put left, right, and center. But once we're clear around that, everything else becomes about how we are being mindful and how we are aligning to what is important to us. So, priority, clarifying, and purpose. How does this fit into this? Because once you have your values, you're clear around what you're touching and what you're not. And you're less swayed away from what is important to you. So, again, it comes down to self and emotional intelligence. That has helped me, but it's still a journey.
I understand. Before I get to you, Chad, and everything, I know Shadia said she had to leave shortly, and I think Bola did as well. I did have one other guest I was going to bring up, and we'll probably get another 30 minutes even with that guest and everything. But the question I was going to ask based on Chad and everything, because he actually gave me the idea of this question, and then there's a question that I ask everybody, because I am definitely one that is about trying to spread positivity in this world and all along this line. So I try to get every guest to give a message of positivity to our global audience. So, Shadia, there's three questions I've got for you, and there's the same go for Bola. Then I definitely want to hear from Chad how he does the balancing act, and then I'll bring in Aaron as well. I believe that's the gentleman's Alan. I'll bring in Alan as well very shortly and everything. But have you ever been triple dog dared into doing anything? That was the question I was going to get based on Chad saying that he'd been triple dog dared into doing, I think it was powerlifting. So I was trying to figure out if Shadia, if you've ever been triple dog dared by your kids or anybody else, or maybe even a friend, and what that triple dog dare was. But and then if there is a message of positivity and hope that you can share with folks, and then how you can be reached and how folks can get in touch with you. And Shadia, despite the glitch in the name, I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and I hope to have you back on in the near future and all along those lines. But I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I know I've been bugging you on LinkedIn for a while, and I'm glad that we finally made this happen and hope that you will make a return trip.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity to share. In regards to the question, inspired by Chad about being triple dog dare to do something. I could think back when I was in college at Hawaii Pacific University. A dear friend of mine, she thought it would be a good idea that we would do talent shows, like local talent competitions on the island. And I was like, what talent are we doing? And so she said, well, we can rap. Like, I'm not really a rapper. I'm a poet, I could, drop some bars, but as far as, doing some P. Diddy and she was Biggie, I was and for the people, She said, we could win money. Okay. So I did it. I said, well, I was so nervous. So she said, well, just wear sunglasses. You'll look cool. And so that you don't have to see the audience. So I wore the sunglasses. I did the rap. So every time I hear the song drop on the radio, I'm like, oh, yes. It brings it back to that time I performed. We didn't win. Okay. But the experience taught me to believe in myself and have that sense of confidence that I could do anything I put my mind to. I had natural childbirth, so having that and having that space, yes, I can come. I did that. I can be a mom. I can create the work-life balance. I can definitely accomplish more in my life. So definitely a confidence booster in my self-esteem. In public performance, definitely went a long way. And how to reach me, I'm on all social media platforms, Shadia Nelson. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, TikTok. I do TikTok videos, not the dance ones, but maybe one day. But I thought about doing the TikTok videos, but I do them of my spoken word. So you can find me there and also on YouTube as well. I do have a website for Shadia Nelson. So just look up Shadia Sia Nelson. I have my own bookstore. And with all artists, it's always important to support artists directly. So follow me on my social and you can order directly from me for any of the books that you would like. I have 6 books available on sale. The sale ends tomorrow, December 22nd. So thank you so much, Mark, for having me. Definitely a pleasure, and I look forward to future opportunities. I've learned so much from Chad and Bola. Thank you so much. I feel so much more inspired for listening to you all. Y'all are amazing.
Yeah.
That's good. Any message of
Thanks,
positivity or
Shadia.
hope that you want to share with the global audience, Shadia?
Message of positivity, lead with compassion. And love is always the answer. Lead with compassion. It goes a long way, and being compassionate to yourself first.
Sounds good and everything. Bola, I know you said you had to bounce as well very shortly. So, any words that you've got in terms of one being triple dog there to come back to Chad and everything, and also any message of positivity and hope and how you can be reached as well.
Thank you so much, Mark, and lovely to connect with you, Shaitia. I hope to connect with you again in the future. Yes, Double Dog there. Charity work. I get called to do different charity work from time to time, and there was a time when I was called to do skydiving, tandem skydiving. So I did that, and I loved it. I loved it. Although I didn't tell the instructor how much I weighed, because I did not realize that when they asked me how much I weighed and I halved the figure, because I just didn't want to say I weighed this amount. I just gave them a half the figure. They matched me with a smaller instructor than they should have. So we struggled a little bit in air. And came down, and he was huffing and puffing. But there you go. So that was nice, and I did it twice after that. And this time, the next time I did give them my correct weight, and I got the right, the right size instructor. So yes, that's and it's fun. It's about the unexpected, isn't it? It's about doing something that is beyond our comfort zone, and that's how we grow. That's how we learn. That's how we expand. And a message really about coming back to love. Coming back to love. This is key. The conditioning that we have received, and we continue to receive, it's really something that we need to rewire. And on a daily basis, to have a spiritual practice or a transformational practice that brings us back to self, to love, on a daily basis. So that would be my message. It all starts from within us. And where I can be reached is my website, www.soulspacehealing.com. And my book, The Daily Soul Bites, is available. It's really available anywhere books are sold online. It's just been released by Balboa Press, division of A House. And I also have a podcast on YouTube, The Daily Soul Bites Show. So I produced that. I'm on season 2 now, really interviewing expert authors, coaches, and entrepreneurs to share their insights and experts from all walks of life. And this is about raising collective consciousness. So yes, that's about it from me.
Well, sounds good and everything. I know both you, Bola, and Shadia have to leave very shortly and everything, but I'm gonna play agent right now and everything. I'm thinking that Shadia and even Chad need to be on Soul Bites very shortly and everything. So maybe Bola can reach out and they can be on your show as well. So I'm gonna play the agent
That,
notion because I
That
think that,
sounds
that
good.
would be great
Yeah.
that would be
conversation.
an honor. That would be an
Wow,
honor,
great
Bola.
idea.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I will leave you now. Thank you so
No
much.
problem. I'll
Bye,
see you.
Okay,
Bola.
have a good
See you
night.
both.
Bye,
Bye bye.
Shadia.
See
Bless
you,
you.
Shadia.
Bless you guys. Well, Mark, it's been a
Oh, hold
two,
on a
but
second. I hit the wrong button.
so I think I remember three things. First of all,
Yeah, but
again,
before we
just
get to
think,
the three things and everything, I had to ask you about how you balance work life and that whole notion and everything, and that had deferred the conversation just for a minute because I do know
okay,
that both
yeah,
Shadia and Bola had to leave. So, how do you do that work life balance? And then Alan will introduce himself, and we got a few
okay,
minutes that I can give him as well. But definitely, how do
yeah,
you do that work life balance?
yeah. Well, hey, Alan, I'm sorry I'll miss all your wisdom, but bless you, brother.
No
So
problem.
just I'm kind of a sarcastic kid, so I think work-life balance is a myth, frankly. And what I mean by that is I think there's seasons where we're always striving for balance, but I think there's also seasons where we just have to pour it out. And I don't know that there's ever an equilibrium, frankly. I haven't found that yet. I think we strive for balance, and I go back to the full engagement. If I'm full, I can handle those different times where the seesaw moves, and there's times periods of rest, and there's times of all out give. And so I think it's an ongoing pursuit, this whole work life balance. I think for me, what I strive to do is I try to align my activities based on my values and my priorities. And I think you've heard this said before. If you really want to see how people spend their energy and their time and what's most important, look at their checkbook and their calendar. Well, checkbook dates me a little bit, but look at how they spend their money and how they spend their time. So if you want to look at balance and priorities, those are two really great exercises to do. I challenge anyone to look at their financial statement the last 90 days and their calendar the last 90 days to see how they've balanced their life in terms of where they've spent their time and their treasure. I think that's a great exercise. So the pursuit of work-life balance for me is always based on my purpose and my priorities, that I'm giving my best. You've heard of the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. I'm giving the best of me to my top 20% of priorities, be it tasks or people. And we also know life happens and we have to take detours and deal with the moment. So it's not so rigid that we don't deal with life as it happens around us. But I think the more we can align our life, our activities, our energy with our top priorities, I think that's where we find the most fulfillment and the most joy in our purpose. So that's my cheesy answer to that.
No, that's a great answer. I don't think that was all that cheesy and everything. Like I said, I know you're going to bounce and everything, but I will spend a few minutes with Alan and learning about his work with oceanography and sharks and all along
Yeah.
those lines. But definitely, I was
Oh,
just
I'm sorry, I'm going to miss
curious.
that.
You might have to stick around and everything. But I was just wondering, Alan, one of the things that I had both of the other guests talk about, Shadia as well as Bola, was that notion of a message of positivity and hope, and definitely how you can be reached as well. And I do know you have that great book, and like I told both of them, I hope that you'll make a return trip because we've had some
I
guests
would,
that
I
have
would love
returned.
that. I would love that, Mark. So again, it's my first leadership book. It's Leadership Heart Unleashed. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. The best way to reach me and find the book is chadpattersoncoaching.com. If I can encourage the heart of one leader, it's been worth the whole process of the book. I think my message of positivity is just give who you are. I old enough now to know that life is too short to be anything less than the amazing person we've been created to be. Forgive yourself, turn away from the negative self-limiting beliefs, embrace and own the gifts and the talents and the passion and the purpose you've been giving, and set that free. That's what the world needs most from every living, breathing person on the planet. So for me, the message of positivity is to really embrace not only your own gifting, but man, embrace that of the people around you and set people free to be who they were created to be. That would be my message hope and inspiration, hopefully today, Mark. So God bless you and thank you for your time. I apologize. I've got to go. Speaking of work-life balance, I have a family commitment in 15 minutes that I need to run to. So Mark, I wish you the best. Alan, have a great time. You're in a great space. God bless you both.
Appreciate you. Hey, Alan, one of the things that I know we've talked about even on this show and on this network is this notion of vocational education. And one of the reasons that they founded Pod TV was they were trying to get education around fiscal literacy and a number of other things. Kim Calhoun is one of the founders, is an engineer. Nick is a pension attorney, and I've been involved with them now for almost 3 years and everything. But I know that sometimes we don't give enough credence to fields that are out of the norm, whether that is the fields that are done by trade schools. And I know we've got some tremendous trade schools here in North Carolina, including Durham Tech and a number of other ones as well. And I've even got friends that have done quite well in the trades, being whether that be bricklayers or truck drivers or a number of other fields. But sometimes people also find other fields that are of interest that don't get as much traction as they probably should. And I know that my grandfather, the biology building at North Carolina Central University, which is one of our HBCUs, is literally named for him because he definitely had that biology background. And Dad, well, although he's known as a visual artist, and some of his art is science-based, but he's very much a scientific-minded individual. He's even had my nephews learn a lot of scientific things, but I don't know that they've been to the ocean. Well, actually, I can't say that because every Christmas time, right after Christmas, they usually go to the beaches of North Carolina. And I know they see some of the things there in terms of the shells and even walking across it. My dad actually has like a little turtle figurine that he brings with him, Bamboo the turtle, that usually he's doing some creative poses with Bamboo the turtle and all in that space. But I was just wondering, one, what got you into the seafaring life and understanding and being interested in oceanography? And I didn't know of that many. I'm sure there are several, but I didn't know of that many oceanography schools. But it's my understanding that you are the founder of one. So I'm looking at trying to figure out more about this notion of oceanography schools and whether we have enough of them. Because I know a lot of people are wondering if we oftentimes talk about space exploration, and the other great unknown is what's all the way down at the bottom of the sea. And I don't know that we've done enough research in that lane, or if that is even getting as much money as some of the other explorations are getting. But I love your take on that and what got you interested in the oceans, because there are 7 seas, and I know that they are very deep down there, but there's even some people that, and I'm just being slightly sarcastic, that think that the Loch Ness Monster and other things might still be down there, but we haven't gone that far down to know whether they are there or aren't there.
Right. And, we've only explored about 5% of our oceans, which is really, it's pretty amazing that after all this time, that's all we've explored. So how I got into this is really kind of a convoluted trail to get into this. In my previous life, I was in law enforcement with the federal government. And I finally just decided, okay, this isn't where I want to be. After 17 years, I said, I want to do something that impacts people. I want them to actually get something out of what I'm trying to put out. So I started a scuba diving charter in Pensacola, Florida. And me and my best friend, and we got us a boat, and we took people scuba diving. And I thought, man, this is great, because we're taking people out to do something that they love to do. They're having a great time. We're having a great time. We're making a little bit of money. This is fantastic. It wasn't quite the impact that I was hoping for, but it was close. So at the time I was married and moved to South Carolina to Myrtle Beach. And my ex-wife was doing her master's on sharks and rays, and they needed a boat captain to help drive the boat. So I volunteered. I said, hey, I can do that. And I would go out with her, and the professor would send a student along with us, like a new student every other day. And I couldn't understand why they kept sending these people out on the boat. So finally, I had to ask the ex, what's going on here? Why we keep getting all these students? And she said, because they can't get any field research experience. So the professor's trying to get them out into the field. And I was very confused because at the time, the school that she was going to had a big, like 48-foot nice research vessel.
Right.
And she explained to me that that vessel only goes out once or twice a semester for a day, and only so many people can go on it. And so I said, you know what? That doesn't make any sense. I said, that's just not right. We should fix this. How can we fix it? So I went out and I bought a boat and I got all the permits that I needed. And we started doing that same work there and having students come from all over the country to join us so they could get the field research time that they needed. And then from there, we moved here to Florida, Clearwater, Florida area. And we've been doing it ever since. It's been 14 years now.
Well, I know one of the things that has been fascinating, we've even talked about it on this network and everything, is what isn't being taught in our schools and what should be taught in our schools and all along those lines. And I'm sure I just mentioned that my grandfather was a biologist when he was living back in, I think he passed when I was around the same time I was born. So like back in the early 60s or something along those lines. But I was just wondering, is this a field that should be in the colleges, or is this a field that should be in vocational spaces, or is it a field that should be totally separated and all in that space? Or because I do know that there, even at Duke and some of our prestigious universities here, there are folks that are trying to learn biology and in some cases marine biology, but like you just said, there's only 5% of the ocean that's been explored, which seems like a travesty in and of its own self and everything. But I was just wondering, what is your thoughts as to college education and whether that's something that colleges need to be paying more attention to, which is the study of our great oceans?
Right. So our school is dedicated to marine biology and marine conservation.
Right.
And the message that I try to give most of our college students or high school students going into this field is education is not enough. You can't put yourself in the position to get the career that you want if all you do is go and get your degree.
Gotcha.
The first thing that happens is when all these marine biologists newly graduated with their diplomas in hand run out to go get a job, the hiring managers have a big question for them. And that is, what experience do you have? And that's what separates the good candidates from the not so good candidates. The more experience you have, the better chance you're going to get a job. And we've come across this. We have about 250 students come to our summer school from across the country, different colleges, 250 universities and colleges. And they all say the same exact thing. We don't get enough field research experience. That's why we're here. So we need a combination of academics. We need to learn that theory, but then we need to go out into the field and practice it and really see what it's like and gain experience out there in the real world. And that could be done at the same time.
No. What do you think? Because I know a lot of times when people think about definitely stingrays, they think about the danger that stingrays have and all along those lines. And unfortunately, there have been several historical movies that don't exactly paint sharks in a positive light, whether that was Orca and Jaws, and I could probably, and I know I just dated myself, go with some other ones as well and everything. So what are some of the myths that people have about sharks? Because I know a lot of people are oftentimes concerned that sharks are predatory and that they are going to be out there to hunt the humans and everything. And I don't think that that is based on any sort of fact, but I do know that that is a fear that people have, even if they're going out to the ocean and everything. So I'm just wondering, what are some of the great myths that people have about sharks and all along those lines? Because I'm thinking, that I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong. I heard a recent quote that somebody said that ants are very social, and of course they're very small creatures, but I've also heard that sharks are very social and might even be more social than us humans and all along those lines. But I'm just wondering, your take is one that has done research as to how smart are sharks and what are some of the myths that people have about sharks?
So sharks are actually pretty smart. You'd be surprised for, a fish. They're actually really smart. They can be taught behaviors. They can be taught to like hit a plate for food and different things. So I guess the big myth about sharks is that if there's a shark in the water, they're going to come and bite you, that they're actively looking for people to bite. And that is just not true. We do have instances where sharks bite people. It's mostly kind of a mistaken identity thing where the sharks are in murky water where they can't see real well, and they can detect your electrical impulses, so they know you're there, but they don't know what you are. The only way they can tell is to take a bite. They don't have hands. They can't feel you. So they take a bite, and almost always they say that's disgusting, and they swim away and go look for a fish or something else that they would prefer to eat. They don't like us. We're not on their food chain. And it's extremely, extremely rare for a shark to consume a human. They may bite you and then think that you're kind of disgusting and then swim away. So I think that's the big thing, is because if you're at the beach, if you're in salt water, you're swimming with a shark. There's a shark near you. And if they were really that dangerous, hundreds of thousands of people would be getting bit every year instead of, the 5 that actually do.
And along those same lines and everything, and even the opposite line of that, I do know that there are certain cultures that are very much into sharks as a part of their menu and all along those lines. So how threatening are we as humans to sharks? Because I also understand that there is a number of even some of the fishing that goes on and some of the other things that go on, that sometimes they are intentionally caught and sometimes they are victims of some of our own habits, including some of the pollution and some of the plastic bottles that have been thrown into the water as well. So how much of that is a threat to sharks, one, them being intentionally hunted, much to the way that elephants are in Africa and everything, and two, the accidental things that are happening from our pollution of the oceans also being a harm to their ecosystem?
Sure. So coastal pollution, things like that are definitely a problem, but the number one threat to sharks is humans. Mm-hmm. Okay. Shark fin soup is a delicacy over in Asia, and somewhere around 120, 150 million sharks are killed every year to satisfy that need for the shark fins, for the shark fin soup. And it's devastating shark populations. It really is. Some of our shark populations are down 98% because of this fishing trade that they have for the shark fins. The really sad part is, and wasteful part, is they'll take a shark and fin it on the boat, just cut the fins off, and then they throw the shark back into the water, where, of course, it sinks to the bottom and it drowns. Right. So they waste the entire body of the shark and just take the fins, because that way they can put more fins on the boat in the hold than they could if they put the bodies of the sharks in there too. So it's an extremely wasteful process. The shark fins are a status symbol over there, the shark fin soup, because it's so expensive. It's kind of like, hey, I got this Rolex, or hey, I can eat shark fin soup because I can afford it. And it's devastating shark populations globally.
Is there any notion, because I know that there are certain animals more on the mammal side that are part of our clothing industry as well? I'm thinking about like the minks and some of, and even to some degree bears and other things, but are there any aspects of sharks that are being threatened because they are part of a clothing industry? Because I don't know if there's I know that there's snakeskin shoes, but maybe there's shark skin shoes as well. So is there any part of that that is a threat to them as well?
That's not as big of an issue. We have problems with shark culling, where governments will go out and actively kill sharks to try to make the beaches safer, right, which is a just doesn't work. That's just the bottom line. It just doesn't work. And you're killing these animals that have done nothing for no reason, and doing nothing with them. There's not really a huge trade in like shark skin or anything. Some sharks are collected for their livers because they have oil in their livers that fishermen use to quiet the waters and different things. So they're definitely used in that capacity sometimes. But again, the shark finning is the number one thing.
It sounds like it and everything. It definitely sounds like that would be an interest. I know that particularly down there in Florida, a lot of people are less the sharks, but more the dolphins are fascinated when they are part of the attraction world. So I was wondering, is that something that conservationists, particularly those that are interested in the ocean conservation, are concerned about? Because is there a move to have the sharks join the dolphins and other things in terms of being a feature at some of these things, whether it's SeaWorld or a number of other places? And is that something that is raised any concerns in the conservation space?
So aquariums are kind of a double-edged sword.
Right.
They're extremely important for education. Without education, people don't understand the threats to sharks and different animals, and they don't move to protect them. We call it learn, love, protect. You learn about the animals. Once you learn about them, you begin to kind of form a bond with them and understand them and start to love them a little bit. And then once you're in the, I love these animals, then you start to want to protect them. As far as aquariums having sharks, I think it can be a good thing to have sharks so that people are drawn in, they see the animal, they know about them. And just like with dolphins and killer whales and stuff, there's some sharks that shouldn't be kept in a tank because their range is too large and they're just not going to do well inside of a tank. Like, so you wouldn't want to be trying to put a great white in a tank, or really even some of the larger sharks like our large great hammerheads or tigers don't do very well. Some of our smaller sharks though, or sharks that don't have to swim to breathe, like nurse sharks, they can just sit on the bottom and relax and breathe. Those sharks do pretty well in aquariums and they're good for education.
Yeah, so those are actually good ones in that sense and all along those lines. So that would be very positive in that sense and all in that kind of way. Now, I know that one of the things I mentioned earlier was this notion of business, and you started a educational business because that's really what a college is and all along those lines. So what advice would you give for somebody that wanted to start their own college of a specialty sort? Because that's definitely what a oceanography school is. And what advice would you just give to entrepreneurs in general?
So the one thing is, do your due diligence ahead of time. Do your research ahead of time. Find out what the requirements are in your state to open a college or to start a school, and look over that list. That's what I did when I first got it. There was 20 different line items that we had to comply with. But I took each one and I said, hey, is this something that we just can't do? And after we went through the whole list, there was not one thing there that we thought we can't get this done. So then we said, okay, we're moving forward because we can make this happen. Same thing, no matter what school you're looking at, you need to look at it and say, okay, are all the steps here doable? And if they are, then passion is the big thing. If you're loving the work that you're doing and the impact that you're having, for me on college students, it really is not like work for me. It's my life. It's what I love to do. And I try really hard to keep the business aspect in check along with the academics, because what we want to do is we want to make it accessible to everyone. So we don't want to charge so much money that people can't come. So we have to manage the business side of things to where we can get the most people coming to our programs to get the benefit of our education. And it's a little bit difficult sometimes, but as long as you love what you're doing and you set your mind to it, you can make it happen. You can kind of force things to go the way that you want them to go so that you can keep the prices down and keep more people coming in. And the more people that come and hear about your program, of course, the better it is, because then, brand identity is really important for people to know and to trust your program. That's a big thing. Once people start coming, you have to treat them right. You have to promise what you're going to do and then do it so that they're getting good value for their time and their money.
Along those same lines and everything, do you think that we as a society, particularly here in the West, but even the globe and everything, are doing a good enough job in creating sanctuaries? For example, I know here in North Carolina, it used to have another name, but right now it is called the Carolina Tiger Rescue, and that is in one of our rural towns, and it's definitely got some of the big cats. And right here in Durham, we have the Lemur Center, which of course
Mhm.
deals with a lot with the lemur population. And even further down, I think towards Greensboro, is the Sylvian Heights Birds Park. So we do have a few here in North Carolina that are in those sanctuary lanes. But I was just wondering, as a conservationist, do you think we are doing enough to protect these various animals, whether they are the mammals or the sea life or a number of other things, or do we need more sanctuaries than what we actually have?
So I think as far as what we deal with, marine life,
Mhm.
here in the U.S., we're doing a really good job. There's a lot of fantastic organizations out there that are doing conservation and coming up with different ways to protect the animals and have marine protected areas and hope spots and different conservation tools that we can use. So I think in the US, we're doing a pretty good job. Globally, not so much.
Mm.
And I think one of the big things is we can come up with all the rules and regulations that we want, but somebody has to enforce that. Without enforcement, the rules are just worthless. So the countries that are seeing a lot of this shark finning and stuff, sometimes they'll put rules and bans in place against shark finning, but then if they don't follow up with enforcement, it just doesn't do any good.
Well, are there particular countries that are not doing that well and that need to be called out and need to do a better job? So I didn't know if there were certain regions that are needing to be called out and maybe inspired to do better than they are actually doing.
Yeah, I think for me, really, China's the big, dog on the block when it comes to shark finning.
Mhm.
It's a cultural thing for them. And until we can kind of change that perception of this shark fin soup being a status symbol and realizing that sharks are extremely important and way more important in the ocean than on a plate or in a bowl, um, we're going to have issues because they are gathering sharks from all over the world, all kinds of different countries in South America and everything. And all these fins get shipped to China. And it's all supply and demand, right? If China didn't want them, nobody would go out and take them because it wouldn't be worth anything. One of the main things I think that we can do, though, is we can switch from kind of our consumptive use of sharks and go into ecotourism and different things to where people are seeing these animals the way they're supposed to be, which is keeping balance in the oceans. And they're magnificent creatures. If you've ever dove or swam with them, they're really fantastic. They're curious and they're just super cool. And people need to see that and those kind of lights as opposed to just using them for food. Because again, they're not really using the whole shark. They're just using the shark fins, which is a waste.
It sounds like a total waste and everything in that sense and everything. What is other than the safety issues, what are some of the other myths that you've had to deal with? And one of the things we were talking about with the other guests before you got on here, and you mentioned that you were partly inspired by your then wife and everything. So one of the things we were talking about was this notion of work-life balance. So I was just wondering how you've been able to manage that work-life balance, because I'm assuming that there's probably still maybe kids from that previous relationship, and maybe there's even new love interest and everything. But I was just wondering how you're able to manage that work-life balance, because I know even in my job working in the cultural arts, it can sometimes be a difficult challenge. But how do you manage that work-life balance?
So, yes, I was listening to people talking about how they manage it, and I should have been taking notes because I am the absolute worst at that. But in reality, I love my job so much that for me, it's not an issue. This is kind of my whole life. So I don't have a Monday through Friday, 40-hour-a-week job. I live this job 7 days a week all the time. When I'm home at 8 o'clock at night, I'm thinking or doing stuff related to either the college or our other school that we have. But it's enjoyable. It's not a burden to me. My kids are all grown, so I don't have any at the house. It's just me. So that's how I keep busy and happy is through work and helping out these college students that need it.
No, and along those same lines and everything, a couple of things just crossed my mind. One is that I know when you think about that work-life balance and all along those lines, and even science, and particularly science, there is this notion, and I mentioned it earlier about what we have gathered that has helped our society from space research, and I think that that's part of the reason that Congress continues to give lots of money to NASA and other things that are doing the research in space. But as you just said earlier, only 5% of the ocean has been actually researched and everything. So I was wondering, because we oftentimes hear the story of Tang. Not that anybody's trying to rush out to get a glass of Tang and everything, but even some of the things like Teflon and other things that came out of the space research. Is there stuff that has come out of ocean research that we are not aware of? And is that the reason that we might need to do more ocean research? Because I do know that one of the things that happens when people think about space research is that there are other benefits that come from it. Some people would even argue that some of the AI and some of the other stuff that we're dealing with now has partially come out of some space research and other types of research. But I was just wondering, are there things even in the sciences that we are missing that maybe are coming out of the scientific research of the ocean that we're not even aware of?
Yeah, well, all kinds of medicines are being developed from the oceans. One of the things that people don't probably ever think of is horseshoe crabs. So horseshoe crabs, they have a blue copper-based blood that is used to test IV drugs.
Oh.
And so if you've ever had an IV drug, it got tested using horseshoe crab blood. And they can actually remove the blood from the horseshoe crab without killing it. It's like a blood donor, just like you would go and give blood.
Mm-hmm.
The horseshoe crabs can do the same thing. So that's kind of something that's super important and has been for a really long time. They've actually taken models of shark skin. Sharks don't grow bacteria too well on their skin.
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty bacteria resistant due to the shape of their dermal denticles, the scales that are on their skin. So they've taken models of that and they've put it over hospital equipment so that the hospital equipment can resist bacteria. And those are just a couple of examples of how, research out into the field, out in the oceans can be very beneficial to us on land.
Gotcha. What is something that you are hoping that folks will find in the ocean? Like if you had your dream wish that you would hope that folks would find, because like you said, I know that there are probably a number of hidden treasures. I don't know that we've gotten all of the things from the Titanic, and definitely I don't know that we've found all of the hidden things that were lost by some of the great pirates and everything. So I just wonder, in Alan's world, what is something that he would just love if it was discovered there in the ocean? Maybe the lost city of Atlantis, for example, if that city actually existed and everything. But I just wonder, what is something that you are hopeful that we will be able to find at some point or another?
Well, that's a good question. It's kind of difficult because there's so many things. Really, I just like the discovery of all the new species. We're still coming out with discoveries of new species all the time. I just heard of one the other day, and it's fascinating that, we've been studying the oceans for so long, but yet there's so much we don't know and so many new things that keep coming up. It's crazy. One of the researchers found a Greenland shark the other day. They estimate to be close to 400 years old.
Oh, wow.
So just all the different marine life out there, to me, is super interesting. There's going to be, I'm sure, some more pirates' gold and some different things found. And who knows what we're going to find out there until we go look.
That is very true. We won't know until we actually get there, and all along those lines. You kind of alluded to it earlier, but how similar, I mean, definitely they are, sharks are part of the fish class and everything, but how similar are sharks to humans in terms of their social skills, in terms of some of the other things that they do? And are there things that we could learn from these great animals that you think would be of benefit to us and everything, just based on your own study of their habits?
Right. So most of the sharks that we actually study around here, we study 12 different species in this area, aren't super social. They don't travel around together a lot. Some sharks, like scalloped hammerheads, can be seen in huge groups sometimes, and other sharks when they're doing some migrations. But the sharks that we have aren't super social. So that's kind of a hard question as far as those guys go, because we just don't see that. We see interesting things about them. Like a lot of our shark species have sex segregation. So all the females are in one area and all the males are in a different area, and they only get together to mate. So that in itself is pretty interesting. Is why exactly do they do that? Why do some shark species do that, but not all shark species? So we've still got a lot to learn when it comes to sharks and rays, and the only way to learn it is to get out there and do it.
And it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but speaking of that, because I know there's been this conversation among our human population, but aren't there some sharks that are literally either asexual or that have different kinds of relationships and aren't always the stereotypical male-female relationship that we hear in most species and everything? Because I think I had read that there were certain asexual type of sharks. I'm not saying it's all sharks, but that there are some that are differently have different styles of reproduction.
Well, they definitely have different styles of reproduction as far as the sharks that we deal with go, but not in the same way that you're thinking. We have sharks that, give live birth. We have some sharks that lay eggs, and then we have some sharks that they actually have eggs inside of the mother and then they hatch later on. But as far as asexual, not in any of the ones that we study.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think I read that somewhere, and I don't know what it was talking about, but it was just talking about that there were, I guess, some rare examples of that in certain shark populations, just like there are certain other animal populations as well. And I don't remember where I heard that from, but it was something about it was having discussions around that in one of my past podcasts or something along those lines and everything. But I definitely know it came up in the course of a conversation. I don't remember the nature of it and everything in that space and all along those lines. But definitely it sounds like they are more standard in the sense of everything. But sharks have been around. It's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are some people that say that sharks actually predate or were around at the same time as the dinosaurs. And we know that dinosaurs were impacted by Mother Nature and definitely some of the things that took place in terms of the glaciers and the ice age and all in that space. So am I correct in thinking that sharks, or at least some species of sharks, are as old as dinosaurs? And if so, how did they survive versus the dinosaurs? And the dinosaurs
actually older. So around 450 million years. That's how long sharks have been around.
Okay.
And they've been around really because they've adapted to be super efficient. So that's why sharks go after like dead, injured, ill fish, is because they expend less energy to go eat those than they would chasing down a healthy fish. So they're very good at conserving energy. They're very excellent hunters. So that's another thing that helps them out. And they have great range sometimes where they can move. Some great white sharks can travel 20,000 miles in 1 year.
And how many styles of sharks are documented right now? Because I know that there are a number of different types. There's the hammerhead, and there are a number of other ones. But how many sharks are there, and what are the more commonly known types of sharks?
Yeah, so there's over 400 species right now that are recognized. The ones that we deal with the most, our most common sharks would be probably black tips. We have black nose sharks in our area, Atlantic sharp nose. And then some of the more well-known bigger sharks are great hammerheads, tiger sharks, bull sharks, nurse sharks, like that. And of course, there's great whites, but we don't have those in our direct research area that we're working with.
Gotcha. So that doesn't exist in that sense and everything like that and everything. And just to come back just real briefly before I ask you another thing about the sharks, but apparently there are some breeds that are doing what they call asexual reproduction, something called parthenogenesis, and I've never heard
Yeah.
about this, but apparently there are animals that literally can produce offspring all by themselves. So I'm sure our audience would love to know what the research is around that, because I think that's where I was going with that earlier.
Oh, okay.
Asexual.
Yeah. We don't really work with that at all.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But there has been some research in that, I guess, with certain breeds that do that and all along those lines. So it does
Yeah.
exist in that sense. So definitely that's interesting and everything. You mentioned you had two schools. Now, is the one just the oceanography school? And what is the second school? Because you mentioned that you have more than one
Right.
school. Or are they both related to marine biology?
They're both related to marine biology. So we have the Coastal Marine Education and Research Academy.
Mm-hmm.
And what that does is provide field research experience for college students May through August. So in the summers when they're off from their college, wherever they're going to college at. So we have international students. We have students from all over the country come down. They go out on boats, usually for about a month at a time. They can come for a week. They could come for 2 months, whatever they'd like. They get out on boats. They go catch sharks and rays. They learn how to tag them, how to collect data, how to handle the animals properly so that they're safe, but also to not harm the animals. And then everything gets released. We don't keep or kill anything. Everything gets released. And then we have Moore Marine College, which the college is dedicated just to marine biology and marine conservation. It's a private 4-year college year round that we just started just so that people interested in marine biology and conservation can not only get their academics, but also get their field research experience at the same time. We offer a minimum of 60 days in a calendar year where we guarantee that they will be out in the field doing research. And that's, opposed to probably a week or less that they would get at any other school in the country.
Now, fortunately, they don't have the same publicity nightmare that sharks have, and I referenced a couple of dated movies and everything. But you mentioned that you do research on shark and rays, and I don't know that
Right.
from my trip to the beach a couple of times, I haven't been as much times as I would like. As a matter of fact, I think my brother, along with my nephews and dad, will probably go to their annual trip next week or right around after Christmas and all along those lines. But I do know that a lot of times people are, wanting to be cautious of stingrays because apparently if you step on them, it might not be all that great for your health and all along those lines. So I know that's one mythology that exists. I don't know that they're trying to intentionally sting you and everything, but I was just wondering your thoughts around that, because I know definitely here in the coast of the Carolinas, people are often worrying about the stingrays that are here and what could happen if you are accidentally bit and everything. So is that factually correct that there is a danger, and two, is it a common danger, or is that just another mythology that people don't need to be as concerned about as they might be thinking they need to be?
Okay, so yeah, you've got a better chance of getting barbed by a stingray than you do bit by a shark. So stingrays lay in the sand, and if you step on them, they don't appreciate it. So they kind of whip their tail. They have a barb that's made out of keratin, like your fingernails. Right. That barb has some venom in it. If it hits you in the leg or something, the barb is also serrated so that it goes in really nice, but doesn't come out so easy. It hurts really bad. It's like getting about 10 bee stings in the same spot all at the same time.
Wow.
There's no known documented deaths from the toxin at all. Nobody's died from just the toxin itself. Normally, the barbs that most people get are in the foot or ankle because they stepped on a ray. If they do that little stingray shuffle where they shuffle their feet, the stingrays can feel that vibration and stuff, and it moves them along so they don't get stepped on. But I'll point out that there's one place in Grand Cayman that anybody's ever been on a cruise or taken a trip to Grand Cayman, they know about Stingray City. Mm-hmm. And Stingray City is an area where fishermen used to stop and clean their fish, and it attracted the rays. And so now there's hundreds of rays that are there, and there's dozens of boats there every day. And the people are in the water swimming around with these stingrays, standing up, petting them, feeding them, playing with them. And all those stingrays still have their barbs. So if they really wanted to, they could be barbing people left and right. And it rarely happens. It doesn't happen that often at all. Okay. So stingrays aren't aggressive. They're not mean. They just don't like getting stepped on. So that's the only time really that you have to worry about the stingrays.
I could say the same thing about certain humans because I know that used to be the whole conversation around certain
Yeah.
gang affiliations and everything. Is folks don't necessarily like to have their shoes or their feet stepped on and all on those
Right.
lines. So that could probably be said about the humans. And if the stingrays could talk, they would probably be like, "Y'all don't like having your feet stepped on either." So they'd
Right.
probably be
Exactly.
saying that we have the same issues as they do and everything. What is we mentioned the sharks earlier, but what is some of the other mythologies that exist around stingrays, and what are some of the other relatives of the shark and the stingray that y'all have been doing research on? But what are some of the mythologies, one about the stingrays and other
Right.
species that might be being researched as well?
Right. So elasmobranchs as a whole are sharks, stingrays, and chimeras. And we focus on just sharks and rays. So the rays really, they are kind of scary to some people because they can get really big. Some of our, manta rays could get 20 feet across, but some of our other rays are still 7 to 9 feet across. So they're very large. And people, I think, are worried that their barbs are at the end of their tail and they're going to come by and just whip you with their tails. And they're not like that at all. They're very non-aggressive. We deal with them all the time. Their barbs, like I said, are made of keratin. They're like fingernails. So you can actually trim them. A lot of aquariums do that when they have touch tanks. You can trim them and they grow back. They do this regularly because they use them for defense. And sometimes they'll get stuck in a shark and pulled out, and the stingray will grow back a new one after a while. It takes a few months, but they can do that. I don't really know that anybody has any mistaken thoughts other than that about stingrays.
Now, do they ever get in? Because I know that sometimes, and I'm going to mention another creature that is much bigger, and I worked many moons ago in Boca Raton, and this bigger creature actually went into a home because I remember working at the newspaper and studying it, or actually doing the coverage of it and everything. But I was wondering, do the manatee rays, which is a much smaller version versus the manatee, that's the animal I was referring to, and everything, because I do know that when I was there, and this was like the late 80s, that there was literally a manatee that floated into somebody's house and got, and those are very big animals, got jammed up in there until they could release it. So I was just wondering, do the manatee rays or even some of the sharks ever find their ways into households if they are following the currents and all along those lines, or is that a rarity and doesn't happen hardly at all?
Yeah, that's extremely rare. Every once in a while, a ray will jump into a boat
Mm-hmm.
because they do jump. Some of the rays we have jump are pelagic rays. But as far as swimming into people's houses or pools, no, haven't heard of that.
So they're not going to do like I said, I know the manatee is much different than a manatee ray and everything. So they're not going to do like that manatee did that I was referring to, or like some of these deers and other animals have done here in North Carolina, where they've just kind of like strayed into a territory.
Right.
I think
No, you don't have to worry about them doing that.
don't have to worry about them straying into the area and getting lost and all in
No.
that line. One thing
That'll
we
be the
talking about,
next horror movie.
yeah, that's
That'll
what
be
I
a
was
Sharknado.
could be another. It could be the next Jaws. It could be the whole notion where the manatees take over the world and decide to go invade the population. So maybe that is another horror movie idea. One thing we were talking about, and then get ready to wrap up with you shortly as well. But one of the things I was talking about with the other guests wasn't just work-life balance, but also this notion of us being our worst critics. I know some people call it the imposter syndrome. It sounds like you are, like my other guests, very positive and very sure of yourself and sure of the work that you do. But I was just wondering, were there times that you, one, had to listen to the outer critics, those that are probably going like, hey, you should never go work for this. You're not going to make any money studying sharks and animals. And were there times that you had that conversation with yourself? So I was wondering how you dealt, one, with the inner critic where you were doubting yourself, and also those outer critics who were probably like, why are you starting a sharks they probably called it a shark school and not even a
Right.
ocean school. But why are you starting a shark school? Nobody wants to learn about sharks. You can't make any money doing sharks. You need to teach people how to be doctors.
Yeah, in the beginning, we had a lot of people tell us, "You're never going to be able to do this. You're not going to get the permits you need. You're not going to get the permission you need to do it. And really, you had to look at it and say, well, how do you know that? Like, did you try and you couldn't get it? Is there a reason we shouldn't be able to get it? And then when we looked at the process, that's when we realized, hey, this is completely doable. We can do this. And we just have to let people know that this is available. And once they know it's available, it's something that they need. So they're going to come and take advantage of it. And of course, we started off really small. We go by booked weeks as far as, how many people are coming during the summer. And I think the first summer we had like 20. And for the last 3 years, we've had about 500. So it definitely started off small, but we've been around for, like I said, 14 years now. So most of the colleges and universities know us. They've had students that have come to us and then gone back and given good reviews. And that's why we keep getting more and more students.
Along those same lines, I had the pleasure, it was actually, I think, on our news show, of talking to one of the gentlemen that was with the Wildlife Center, or one of the federal agencies down there, but he was also part of the Florida Python Challenge, which I know is a regular event and all in that space. And of course, he was talking about the danger as they were gathering up those pythons and everything of that area. So while they are very much, as you just said earlier, benevolent for the most part, if I can use that term, and everything, I'm sure that there are dangers in dealing with a wild animal and all along those lines. So I was just wondering, how have you dealt with that? And have there ever been any close calls with yourself and everything? Maybe you had
Sure.
a cut and the sharks got a little bit too happy when they saw the sight of blood. So I was just wondering, how have you dealt with danger, and have there been dangerous moments in your own research?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sharks are like anything, right? They can bite. So when you're handling them, you have to be aware to just be very cautious around their mouths, especially the bigger sharks, because we catch sharks, 10 feet long, tiger sharks that are 10 feet long and, 400 or 500 pounds that we're dealing with. And yeah, you have to really be focused on safety to make sure that no one gets hurt. So, and the same thing with the rays too, because the ray barbs are extremely painful. So we don't want anybody getting barbed either. So unfortunately, I've gotten the pleasure of getting a barb in my hand one time. And then we were dealing with an 8-foot lemon shark. And lemon sharks are pretty docile when they're in the water, but they do not like being on the boat. So they have the tendency to bite pretty much everything that's around, buckets and hoses and rope and everything. Well, this particular lemon shark we were putting back in the water because we release all our sharks, and it decided it just hadn't had enough fun. So it kind of swung back onto the boat and latched onto my foot.
Oh,
Yeah. And wouldn't let go. We actually had to put pipes in their mouth to kind of pry our jaws open to get my foot out. Now, fortunately, we all wear nice, good shoes on the boat, closed-toed shoes. So it only got 2 teeth through the top of my foot. It wasn't something I had even had to go to the hospital for. And the way I look at our safety record is that's really the only bite of incident in the last 14 years and probably about 6,000 sharks tagged.
well, that's not bad at all. If that's all you had to deal with, that's
The ray barb was way worse.
That was way worse.
Yeah, that was way worse.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And how strong of a reaction you get depends on how big the barb is and how far it penetrates into your arm, foot, leg, whatever it happens to be. Because there's actually a groove on the underside of the barb where the toxin lies, and it's got a little tissue covering over it. So the deeper it goes in and the bigger that barb is, the more toxin you get injected with. So that depends on how much you're going to be in pain.
This may sound like one of the questions is one that was based on one of my previous guests and everything, but I was just wondering, there are some people that believe in reincarnation and believe in all of that. So I'm thinking if you came back, you'd probably want to come back as a shark. So is there a particular type of shark that you would want to come back in if you were to come back as a shark, or maybe you want to come back as a stingray. So if you had that option and you were able to come back as something else, what type of shark would it be if you get up to heaven and God's like, hey,
Well, one of my favorite sharks that we deal with on a regular basis are tiger sharks.
okay,
And tiger sharks are super cool. They can do some crazy things. So let me give you an example. Let's say a tiger shark wants to go down deeper
mhm,
and hunt for some fish. He can actually go down to the bottom and swallow things like rocks or even pieces of metal or whatever he finds to help give him more ballast to weigh himself down so it's easier to do the hunting in the area he's trying to hunt. And then when he's done, he can just puke up those rocks and throw them away and go on with his life. That's pretty crazy.
that's
One of
totally
shark's
great.
favorite, a tiger shark's favorite food are sea turtles. They also eat sea birds that go down into the water to catch fish.
Mhm.
They have a specifically shaped tooth to deal with sea turtle shells that are like a can opener, so they can shake the sea turtle back and forth. So I'm going to have to go with tiger sharks. They're pretty cool.
It sounds like very cool. It definitely sounds like a great animal to come back as if you were to do that. One of the things that we were talking about with the early guests, and actually Chad Peterson, who was the business coach, actually came up with this idea, but I'm gonna throw it at you, and then we'll get ready to wrap up with the questions that I ask everybody as we get ready to end this very wonderful show. And I've definitely learned
Okay.
a lot about sharks and everything. But he was talking about how his daughter dog dared him to do powerlifting. So that's what I was asking everybody else. And one of the people had been double dog dared to do a talent show, and I think somebody else had been double dog dared to skydive. So if you were to say something that maybe a friend dared you or double dog dared you into pursuing, what would that have been, either as a shark investigator or a person involved in this line of conservation, or just in life in general? Maybe your wife, back when y'all were
Right.
married, double dog dared you to do something. So what is
So,
something that surprised you that you were talked into doing it, and what was it?
yeah, I'm going to really have to say 5 or 6 years ago, I was talking about starting this college.
Hmm.
And of course, everybody thought it was the craziest thing ever. And yeah, one of my friends was like, well, I dare you to do it. Like, why don't you do it? Do it. And at the time, I was just like, I don't know. It seems like it's so much, like it's just overwhelming, like it's almost impossible. And then I just kind of took it as, all right, let's see. Everybody thinks it's impossible. Let me see if I can get this done. And here we are 5 or 6 years later, and we're started up and rolling along. So that's surely one of the things that I remember most, because it was a turning point in my life to take on this challenge.
Sounds like it. Sounds like a very powerful turning point, and all along those lines. Like I said, getting to wind down. This has been a thoroughly interesting conversation. Hopefully, I can get you back on in the near future. I'm getting ready to go find me some food, and I'm sure the sharks are going to try to find them some food as well. But what I get all my guests to do on these shows is share how they can be reached, share how they can be gotten in contact with. And like I said, I am all about spreading messages of positivity and hope. So any message of positivity and hope that you want to share with our global audience, I'm sure that they would love to hear that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So people can look up the Coastal Marine Education and Research Academy online, just CMERA, CMERA. They can look up More Marine College, just moremarinecollege.com, and find out more information about that. We have both undergrad and graduate programs. And then as far as the message of positivity, I guess my biggest thing I have to come back to is find something that you really love, find something that you enjoy in life, and do that, because I haven't worked in years. I'm doing what I really enjoy and I love doing. So it doesn't feel like it's work to me anymore. It feels like I'm just living a great life, and I'm meeting so many fantastic college students. Our college students are really passionate about conservation and about marine biology, and just to be able to help those students, get where they want to go and get the careers they want to get, super fulfilling. And everybody can have that. They just need to find what they love and work in that field, work in that direction. And I also like to say that you got to come at life with a sense of gratitude, grace, and generosity. Gratitude for everything that you have and all the opportunities that are available to you. Grace for yourself when you're stumbling and falling and not doing the right things, and grace for other people around you that are in the same situation sometimes. And then I like to say generosity with your time, your energy and your passion. Share with people, be willing to help other people to get where they want to go. And in that way, you kind of get there too. So it's important to be generous.
Yeah, definitely important to be generous and everything. Just really quickly, as I was thinking about it, as we're heading out the door and everything, do you think we spend enough time paying attention to Mother Nature? Because that was something that I asked even the other guests and everything. And you're in this conservation space, and I know a lot of people were inside during this hard times that we've been in with the pandemic and weren't paying as much attention. But I think that now we're paying even closer attention to Mother Nature. But I was just wondering, you think we're doing a good enough job of paying attention to Mother Nature in general?
I think we're doing a better job than we have. I think there's still room for growth. I think there's still room for improvement. But it definitely seems, from my point of view, the people that come through our programs and stuff, they're doing a really good job. And I think that the awareness is getting out there of how important it is. So I think we're headed in the right direction, but we still got a ways to go.
Yep, definitely. As we head out the door, like I said, getting ready to play a couple of PSAs and all along those lines. I was going to tell you that if you have a PSA about the Conservation Center or all along those lines, I would gladly play it, even on other people's shows, because we have a show about the cruise industry and everything. So if you want to email that to me, I can even add it into the rotation if there's a PSA that talks about what y'all are doing and all along those lines, and there's no cost for that. So like I said, it was just something that you have that's a promotional video and you want to send it to me at bluesradio@gmail.com. I will gladly add it to some of our rotation so that folks can hear about this fantastic organization that you have going
thanks so
on.
much. I appreciate it.
Hey, no problem at all. Like I said, you're ready to go out, I think, with a friend of mine's piece that was around mental health and all along those lines. But first, I'll do with the one about the veterans. But it's been a fun conversation, and I hope to get you on our new show as well as some of our other shows in the not too distant future. So hopefully we'll have you make a return trip as well.
That would be fantastic. I'd appreciate it.
No problem. You have a blessed day and have a great one.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
How you holding up? Nothing wrong with getting help.
If I promise to look into it, will you drop it and help me build this fence?
Now you need my help.
If you or a veteran you know needs support, don't wait. Reach out. Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Boy, I got the power. These nigga bitch, he nigga cow. Pop me a perk, knew that it worked. I've been
into cars.
Welcome to Two Big Guys on Cars. I'm Thomas Hill along with Denver Wright.
You don't want to miss an episode of Two Big Guys on Cars. Your hosts, Denver Wright and Thomas Hill, enjoy cars, entertainment, cars, man caves, and oh, did I mention cars? Denver and Thomas review interesting cars owned by you, their viewers and fans. Got an amazing automobile? They'd like to put your car on TV. Visit them online, watch their shows, and see their merch at www.twobigguys.com. That's the number 2. www.twobigguys.com.
Thank you for joining us this time. Until next time on Two Big Guys on Cars.